Rolling. Yep, it's working. Okay, thank you. Bye-bye. All right, I think we're still waiting for 2 live people, but we're going to get started since it's already 12:05. And let me just make sure to tell people. Okay, it should be working now.
Okay.
I didn't hit the streaming thing.
Okay.
So hi, I'm Nicole Natali from CREC. I'm a speech language pathologist and assistive technology person. I apologize for my voice. I've had a cold for a number of days and can't seem to kick it, but we will keep going on, right? We all know working in the schools, I don't think I'm contagious or anything like that, but it's like, it's easier to go in than to take a day off. And this is Lisa. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
I'm Lisa Piano. I'm also one of the specialists that works with Nicole, part of the AT team, and in my role there I do AT evals for kids with disabilities or who need access to the curriculum. And another big part of my role is to, in addition to doing trainings, I do a lot of training in districts on literacy for kids who have disabilities, universal design for learning, and writing IEPs that are designed to result in educational benefit.
All right, so welcome everybody. We are going to go around and have you guys be introduced. And the live stream isn't working, so we're trying to figure that out as well. Lisa, do you mind just
Sure.
having everybody introduce themselves?
Yeah,
and
definitely.
Introduce the day?
So why don't we start right over here? Tell me
Sure.
what district you're from and what your role is there.
Sure, I'm from Manchester. My name is Katie McNamara, and I'm a speech-language pathologist.
Oh,
Hi.
great.
Hey, guys.
Hi, I'm Sue Oates. I work in Torrington. I'm actually their teacher of the deaf, but I've been around long enough that I've done transition and pre-K, and I'm still doing all of it, so I came.
Oh, good. All right, great.
So
Kim
Jack of all
Clark from
trades.
Terryville High School. I'm the transition program teacher there.
Excellent.
I'm Sarah Billingsley. I'm also from Terryville, and I'm a speech pathologist.
Super.
Alex Avalos, South Windsor High School. I'm Kim, and special education researcher and teacher.
Excellent.
Sam Kim Tipton, South Windsor, 11th, 12th grade research teacher.
Excellent. Okay, great. I just did I was in South Windsor, but with the elementary school teachers back in October. Had a very nice time with them. All right. So I'm going to get us started while Nicole is figuring out what's going on with our live stream.
Yep, sorry about this.
No
guys.
problem.
So incidentally, before we get started, oh, he's calling me back. But I know most of you guys are pretty close, but we live stream this, and typically it works. And then we also archive it. So we could explain that. Hi.
So once we show the live stream, we save it so that if you have other people at your schools that want to watch the live stream, they can watch the recorded version of that. And that could be helpful because, like, for Manchester, you could have up to 3 people at any consortium meeting, so people can't get out of the building. But if they have time to watch it via live stream, they can participate with us that way, or they can take a look at the archive link and watch that. So we're trying to make it possible for as many people in the districts that are part of the consortium to get to be able to be with us at these meetings.
And do you want to talk a little about the lending library? Because I don't know if everybody here knows about
Sure. Does everybody know about the? Okay. Have you guys ever borrowed anything from the lending library?
Yes.
Okay, good, excellent. So everybody here has borrowed things from the lending library. We keep adding new things. We try to keep everybody updated as to what our new purchases are, but we have a little bit of everything from personal pen readers, we have iPads, we have a Surface, we have a Google Pixel book, we have toys, we have switches, we have different types of styluses, pretty much anything that you can think of. We've got a couple of pieces in the library that you can take out and try with kids. So if you're interested in trying something before you buy it, that's always a great thing for a district to be able to run some trials with a device or a piece of equipment before they have to commit to spending the money. And that's part of the consortium membership. So we do have some forms that you need to fill out, but that's a great way to get some equipment out to you to try with kids. And we're going to be looking at lots of applications today, many of which might be on an iPad. So if an iPad is an appropriate device for one of your students, then you can borrow the iPad, and we have an account that allows you to download apps that you'd like to try. So you don't even need to commit to buying the app. We can download it for you on an iPad. You borrow the iPad, give it a try, and take it from there. Any questions about that?
If this one doesn't work.
All right.
You can see it?
So while Nicole is getting going with this, I'm just gonna go over what our goals are for today. So we're gonna be talking about transition, and while we're gonna share lots of resources with you, we thought it would be really important to go over some of the federal and state regulations regarding transition and what the plans are that you need to make in order for kids to make a successful transition. Especially, we're gonna be focusing on today transition from high school to either a post-secondary education setting or work. So we want to make sure that everybody has a understanding of what needs to take place to make sure that those tools are used successfully, because it's one thing to get the tools, but we want to make sure kids are successful using them, because you guys know too that there can be many instances where we think we're recommending something that kids are going to use and be successful with, but despite our best intentions, that assistive technology doesn't get used or doesn't get used correctly. So we want to make sure if we're making recommendations and setting kids up for that post-secondary setting, that they have something that really works for them and that they'll use. So we're going to look at tools that can be used in a variety of areas. And so Nicole and I are going to do a quick little demonstration of a variety of tools, and then we want to give you as much of an opportunity as we can for you to play around with it, because it's one thing to stand up here and watch us do it, but it's more meaningful for you to get some hands-on practice with those tools so you get an idea of what might work for your students and what might not. And we've also got several resources for how to make a plan for that transition. So again, that we're doing this in an intentional way, and we're developing skills so that kids can be more independent after they leave our school setting. So those are our goals.
Thank you, Lisa. Sorry about that.
No
So
problem.
why don't we take, just knowing what our goals are today, before we get into the nitty-gritty of some things, why don't we, if you guys don't mind talking in a group over there, you guys right here, just turn and talk to your neighbor and talk about, what you're already doing for AT for transition and what burning questions you might have for today that you want to make sure you get answered. So go ahead, take a few minutes to do that with your group or team members, and then we'll share out.
Hi.
You have to talk on the preschool speech.
I do. I actually go to the other side. Transition. Yeah.
I need because last year was thinking, well, we have Chromebooks and we really don't use them much.
Yeah.
What do we do with technology? What we I mean, I do have a student who works on classes, so she's conference ready ways.
Some kids with iPads, but it's more.
Not verbal. So in the community, I find it easier for them and less. It makes them less of a target as, oh, I'm different. I have a disability because everyone uses their phone. I just had a situation, and I want to kind of ask you about it because you're the teacher of the
So she has to
TTY service. We've had a situation where one of my girls she can't see at home, so we're trying to get her like some ideas for the TTY service because ADA.
Do you go under Creative Academy, or
they don't have an option.
go live? You go
Live with speech impairments pretty much. So it's kind of odd too because you think they would, because a disability service would. So I guess the teacher had tried that TTY service, but the dispatcher talks really quickly, so it's hard for them to do like the relay call kind of situation. So
Like a reverse caption?
yeah,
Is that what you're looking to get?
yeah,
So she can read it or save it or see it as opposed to just listening to it?
so that she can type the message and then someone else will read it. Yeah, we'll voice it for her pretty much.
No, we work with
So
Laura
versus
says she doesn't think they have
For
a
the
call
dispatcher from
delays.
ADA.
Yeah, we'll
Because they
share
don't
that.
accept text messages.
Isn't that weird? Ooh, that's
Yeah,
very weird.
yeah. So that's just a
Yeah.
situation that came up like this past week, so I wanted to kind of maybe ask them
Cause
about
we
that.
have, like, I have kids that text me on my personal phone,
Yeah.
we have no text accepting phones in our district.
Oh,
So like,
okay.
all the district provided phones,
Yeah.
so if you're
Yeah.
doing like offices, et cetera,
Yeah.
you can't see text.
Right, right.
So it's like, I'm giving out my private number to connect with kids, because otherwise they can't connect with
I think
anybody
about-
because your phone's
I
out.
think I use
It's
the adult
interesting.
like
Yeah, yeah,
except
everyone-
So you have that
work,
weird
and I'm
kind
like,
of
okay,
thing.
well, what are the
Yeah.
things that I
Different
use?
twist to it.
I
Exactly,
use Google
exactly.
Calendar all the time,
Yeah,
No,
so
let's
I always try to
Yeah,
impart my
but that's the thing too, I think
Yeah.
once everyone's
Please,
kind of on the same
organization,
page with the
because these are
newer
all things that I learned, and I
technology,
use
it shouldn't be as
technology
much of an issue because
as
you
it
can
was
just text
becoming
someone.
available,
Yeah.
but
Instead
now
of-
it's
yeah.
available to them in high school
Right.
now, so I'm like,
Because
oh,
now they have that
you
whole
learn
thing
how
about
to,
911, you
organize
can
yourself,
text,
set up
you can
notifications,
speak.
set up your
Yeah,
calendar,
It sounds
set up
like,
everything
Especially
on the
for a
same,
service
like
for
Google
people with
Calendar.
disabilities, right, like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Right, so now I'm thinking,
So
okay,
it's interesting.
where do I put my
Yeah.
to-do list? Well, I have it.
But,
It was
um,
about
Right.
Easter seals, it's about CP, right, if they have anything.
Like,
That might be
Do
a
you
good
use
idea to
Google?
contact
They're pretty
them.
decent.
No.
Yeah.
so Google,
But I just felt bad for her because she was waiting for, the bus driver to pick her up at one location.
Oh,
And go
She
to
was
the
just in a
right.
different street.
Yes, yes, yes.
Oh, yeah.
At the
If you
school,
go to the
so,
right,
and then they mark it against
but
you
there's
if
also
you
an
miss
app.
the
Right,
bus.
cause you, yeah,
on
you
your
can
It's not her fault.
Okay.
So I called them and they like,
Oh, yeah, I see
they
the
got rid of
text.
the fact that she
Yep.
missed it, it doesn't count
Yes,
against her,
it's like a
but
checklist.
I was
Yeah.
like, but
When you
I
try
know
it,
that
it goes
she
away.
can't
I'm
call
gonna
you
tell them
if-
to,
unless she's with an
Fairfield
adult
Kids
that
will
can
do
do
a
it,
chat,
so.
right,
Oh,
just
okay,
kinda
got
easy to use.
That's
All right,
cool.
10 more seconds.
But, yeah.
And that's a more streamlined
Our other
version
thing
of
is
the
just-
Keep has a checklist function,
Yeah,
but a lot of students
definitely.
won't go through the extra process.
I think
opening up
especially once they get older
looking
too,
up the
because
note with
it
the
is more
checklist.
you
So
want them to
task
do
is,
it on
I
their
guess, a
own.
running
Therefore, it's like,
And every time
running
you
list.
Less.
you
Yeah.
open it up every time you go to your email.
And then it becomes, was it a school issue?
Oh, okay.
Because the school's paying for all stuff.
Okay.
All right, I heard a lot of
yeah.
rich discussion.
Sounds good.
Just a few
I'll move my
things
stuff over.
for the people who are live streaming that don't have YouTube chat. I put my cell phone number purposely on the front slide, so you can always text me if you have questions or if you wanna chime in. It's 860-929-8673. So I know the new Fairfield people they could view it, but you can't actually chat. And Laura Baxter is over in Ridgefield, and she can chat. So we will talk about her. So Lisa, do you want to tell me what Laura just said?
And Laura's gonna be in and out because she has an IEP meeting, but she wanted to be here for as much as she could. So she said that in her district, she said that she didn't think they had a protocol in place for making sure that students have what they can readily use in the workplace.
Okay, that's interesting to know too. So we'll put that there as a, should we have and should districts have a specific protocol for when we know this student is going to a particular workplace or just the workplace, depending. Is there a protocol that districts are using? Is anybody aware of any of them in your districts? A protocol that no? Okay.
I'm a little confused about that, I'm sorry.
So I think what she's saying is we don't have a protocol or process put in place for when we know that a kid, so maybe you've got a 17-year-old who's going to be, or is in even a work study job right now. Do we have a protocol that we're putting in place to see what AT they need, what AT they're using, how do we train them?
Okay.
I think I'm pretty sure that's what she means by that, and if not, she'll chime in.
And we're gonna look at some, maybe not a protocol per se, but some guidelines for skills that you wanna make sure you've addressed, and how to make plans to make sure the student knows how to use it and can use it in the workplace. So we're gonna look at some resources that exist for that.
So let's, go ahead, Sue. Yep.
When our kids begin going out, they have job coaches that go with them.
Yeah.
So if it's a student that's using AT in a classroom, we figure out if that matches their job description.
Yeah.
And then again, the independent piece, how do you know when it's gonna be time to change? So you can come back, how do you know what time, set your timers, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
It's all reviewed in class, and then the job coach follows up. And if we've been fortunate in the sense that most kids have phones, and they've been able to, use their phone appropriately, and it's not been an issue.
And our kids' devices will follow them to the transition program, so that if they have a Dynavox or an iPad, they'll be able to use it in that program too.
Yeah,
So.
great. And now, did you guys have any burning questions from this table? And if not, just you could share. I know you were talking a lot, so could share without anything.
We just talked about what we're currently using four of us seem to have some different populations, but
Right.
Alex and I've been using the suites of apps and extensions and
Yep.
things like that, and how that's
Mhm.
made a difference
Sure.
for us.
Gotcha. Anything else?
I just really liked the way Alex had is it Alex?
Mhm.
Yeah. He had commented that he just tries to think of what he requires to be successful in his
Mhm.
job and to
Yep.
stay organized and on task, and
Yep.
so he just tries to impart all of that to his students, how to use the calendar effectively.
Yep.
And then we talked about Google Tasks.
Yeah.
I know I've been recently using that for my to-do list
Yep.
and the app that goes with that,
Yep.
so we were sort of just playing.
But you bring up a good point, because what we use for kids in school, right, we want to use what's least restrictive in the environment, and oftentimes that might be Google, right, or Google Calendars or whatever it is, because the whole district is using it. But we also have to consider when that child or that student is going to transition out of your school, what are they going to be using personally? You know, what's going to happen, whether it's at college or what's going to happen at work. Sometimes it's what you're already using, but sometimes it isn't. So you have to, it's a little bit of a different consideration when a student is going to be aging out, you know, and what are they reasonably going to be using as just independent human beings.
Right. Laura,
yep.
oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Laura made a similar comment because she was saying, you know, they're using Chromebooks in school, but they're going out to a work setting. A Chromebook might not be the best option
Yep.
to take with you to a job site, whereas
Mhm.
like what you were saying, a phone, being able to have tools available on your phone might be more realistic. But a kid going to college might be fine with a Chromebook.
Right.
So,
Right. And I keep hearing still college kids, they're not really using Chromebooks all that much. And I think they're starting to more and more, but a lot of them get laptops or Macs or PCs, because I just think they're just more, you know, they're still using Word and PowerPoint and that type of stuff. I think it'll change a little bit, but that was an interesting.
They're a little janky.
Yeah, it's a good way to put it.
For,
And I met an 18-year-old last year. I was doing a transition eval. He was going to college, and you know, they really weren't using a lot of Google in college still. I mean, I had the fortunate ability to know what school he was going to. He was going to a community college nearby, so I was able to talk to his admission, you know, some of the admissions counselors, and they really told me they're not really using Google Classroom in this particular university. They were using, you know, their other platforms, and so we had to take that into consideration. It didn't really make sense to use a Chromebook that the district was using at that point when he was going to be using something else, and he needed to practice with it, and we'll talk about some of the reasons why before he transitioned out, because it's hard enough to go to college with a kid with a learning disability. You know, there's just other challenges, and then to learn your technology, right? They're just adding even more. Any burning questions that anybody has? Yeah.
Well, that just leads me to wonder, I have a lot of students who use iPads to communicate,
Yeah.
they're nonverbal.
Yeah.
And only one of my current students took the initiative to go out and get her own
Yeah.
iPad Pro.
Mm-hmm.
But for several of the other students, once they exit,
Yep.
they leave their iPad behind.
Yes.
Are there ways that we can help the parents initiate that to
Yep.
get their own
Absolutely.
iPads to
Yeah.
take with them, even if they are going to day programs or supported work environments, to be able to have a way to communicate?
Absolutely, it's a problem, right? So incidentally, I have seen districts charge a family $1, and the family buys the iPad. I've seen that, it can happen. So, especially when you're talking about like a Dynavox that might not necessarily work for any other student in the district. I've seen districts.
That was sorry to interrupt, but through
that was
the private
personal,
insurance.
private
Yeah.
and okay.
Right.
But I have seen districts do that, so it can happen, number one. Number two, if you can plan enough ahead of time, there is support out there through DDS, Voc Rehab too. Sue, I know you're nodding your head here. What else have you had success with?
The programs, like the LARC programs,
Yep.
they have more money than we do, and when you walk in, everybody gets an iPad. So, in Torrington anyways, that's the way that worked for them. So all the kids that left us that went there for an 18 to 21 transition program, they were handed iPads when they walked in.
But are they theirs to keep?
I don't know if they're theirs to keep, but when they become 21, they manage and they switch, they become the next transition point.
So they've then had, you know, how many years in school have you used it to communicate? How many years in your 18 to 21 program have you used it to communicate? So how else could you? So it either becomes a BRS issue or I don't know who else picks it up at that. My agencies kind of dissolve for me
Right.
at that point.
But it's definitely thinking about planning about that beforehand. Now in Connecticut, you can get an iPad with an app funded, but it's considered, I forget the name of it right now, the Pro Slate, I think it's what it's called. So it's essentially $1,000 iPad. So what it is, it's an iPad with a special case and the app that they bundle all together. And that can be if they're Medicaid eligible. There's been success with funding iPads with devices through that. Sometimes they'll then go to a CCMC and have insurance cover it and do an evaluation, but you don't want them to get necessarily something totally different than what they're already using. So it's definitely about planning beforehand and figuring out what agencies can be involved to help. And some parents, if they have the means, just want to buy it for their kid themselves. And that's an option too. And we have the option to ask that at a PPT. The district is the payee of last resort. Not everybody realizes that, right? We've had this discussion, I know, in Plymouth, where the PPT says a student needs this, the PPT has to provide it. There's nothing in the law that says the PPT has to buy it even. You could hold car washes for 3 weeks and raise money for it. You could loan it from a lending library until you've made a decision. And you can ask parents if they want to cover it. So can you talk a little bit about so you had a student who they did privately?
That one, it was actually the speech pathologist that worked before me, got it going, but just looking through the paperwork, it was honestly like a stack of paperwork that's big, and there was like a letter from the pediatrician, a letter from the speech pathologist, so a lot of work went into it, but it was covered, I believe he had Husky insurance, and so he had the Dynabox, he graduated, he's 22 or 23 now, so he still has that device, which is great. But I have another.
It's a Dynavox, right? Because it's a dedicated speech device, so
Yeah.
insurance will pay for that, but not for iPads typically.
Like our district doesn't have Dynavoxes to distribute.
No, we don't even have one in our lending library.
Yeah.
But I have seen iPads with apps get covered under that Pro Slate. They call it the Pro Slate. That's what it's called. Device. But again, you're paying almost twice as well. It's the fee for the app and the case and all that kind of stuff. So but it is an iPad. So it can happen. Now, what you're talking about with the funding process, it looks like a lot and it is time consuming, but those companies, Dynavox, Prenke Ramic, I'm trying to remember the other one off the top of my head, they all have literal people that will help you get things funded. They have banks, databases on their websites where you fill in the information and you can print out those boilerplate type letters, but you always need an evaluation. But it might look, what's the word I'm trying to, daunting, and there is paperwork, but a lot of it is fed to you.
Yeah.
So that's just good to know. Yeah.
We also have a student who's working with Besby, and she requires an iPad. We're working on it.
Yeah.
However, she's already turned 18. She's a senior this year, and she has a progressive issue, so it didn't come to the forefront until last year. It started to become an educational issue. And what I was told by the Besby worker was, if she were younger, they would have bought her an iPad, and it was hers.
Yeah.
But because she was so close to 18 and now has turned 18, the Besby won't buy her one because she's like aged out of that, whatever it is. So I don't quite understand how all that worked, but that's what I've been told.
Well, because they would buy it and then she would be, in 6 months, it would be done.
Yeah, but if it's hers, like she's planning to go to college,
Yeah.
and she, you know, if it would be given to her.
Lisa. Yeah.
So it had nothing to do with us. It was a direct Besby to student, but because of her age, she said it would be difficult for her. I got the feeling it was almost like competition for the dollars, like how many do we need for how many kids, so we'll fund the younger children faster.
Yeah. And also BRS, I know we've had this experience in Plymouth. Our student we worked with, I think they ended up personally getting her an iPad or fundraising elsewhere, but they will, and this is a kind of a weird situation in Plymouth, but they will fund technology for a student to go to college, because they know that student's going to be in the workplace, or technology for the workplace. So they will do it. It's a little bit of a laborious process, but if you can get it going a little bit earlier, The problem with what happened in Plymouth, I hope it's okay to talk about a little bit, was that there was nothing really in place at the time, so she needed a whole evaluation and all that kind of stuff, and so then by the time that all kind of happened, the timing was poor. Does that make sense? But if you have things in place at 15, 16, 17, it's a lot easier for them to then help support you, students in college or in the workplace.
So would you recommend that kids we have, like, who we think might need, maybe not, who need some technology going on, maybe not as intensive, but some technology, we start at like the freshman year with an AT eval and progress.
And it doesn't have to be an evaluation, consultation, right? Yeah, looking at them, their environment, their tasks, what do they need to be successful and independent? And, some of these things, it gets a little tricky when we're talking about transition, right? Lisa, especially, is a lot of the things that we're going to talk about are on personal devices, which starts getting a little tricky at 14, 15. Districts aren't going to buy a kid a cell phone with a data plan, but we still can be working on some of those skills with other pieces of technology too, and then if they happen to use it with their own personal, that's great. But then there's some kids, you have to put it in their IEP because it's what they're going to use to be successful. So there's like a fine line there too. Did you have a comment, sir? No.
Okay, so we went over the goals.
Yeah. So when we start talking about transition, there's actually a decent amount of research that shows that even if a kid's successful in school, that AT is not necessarily going to be successful in a new environment, especially in a work environment, which really does make a lot of sense. The work environment and even the college environment is a lot different. And so we're trying to plan for, and best practices to plan for transition before they get out or while they're in a supported work rate scenario at school. Oops, oh, we clicked on the iTunes opened up. That's okay. To practice in very functional, explicit contexts, because that's how students are going to learn. And so you need to learn specific skills for AT to transition, and that's really where we have to plan, we have to provide some AT services, and also use those self-determination skills and teach them those self-determination skills which are required, right, in transition planning for kids with disabilities, so they all have to come together. And I'm sorry, I missed it. I said there's 2 people who do transition? You're one of them? Okay.
And with that terminology about self-determination, one of the other things about the request for this particular session did ask us to focus on executive function skills, so we're going to be talking a lot about that.
Yep. So this was just a slide about what you need to consider, what are they using now, but what will they need in the next environment. And as much as you know about that new environment, the better. It's sometimes really hard because you don't necessarily know where a kid's going to go, but if you know they're going to be in a work environment, even if it's not a specific location, what are the skills this particular student needs to be successful with work? If you know they're going to college or a community college, it's really important to know what tasks that person needs to complete.
And you can see from the questions that we just were discussing that third bullet there is all what it's about. So we have these situations where kids are ready to transition, but we're not prepared to have a plan for what materials and who's going to pay for it, how are they going to get it, who's going to provide that training and ongoing support. So we need to be thinking about that at the same time that we start developing those transition goals when kids start at the beginning of high school. And that, again, you guys already brought this up. There has to be a timeline so that it isn't June and we're starting to talk about how kids are going to transition with their technology.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many requests for referrals I get at 17 and 18. And it's, and I'm not saying it's too late at that point, but I think people realize, wow, his kid could have used AT all along or for a long time, and now we can't send him out in the world without something. I get that a lot. Yeah, go ahead.
I think sometimes too, I work at the high school, and sometimes things have been tried earlier on, but either the follow through from school to school doesn't happen, or it wasn't successful with that student, but there's no documentation. You know what I mean? Yeah.
So you bring up, what district are you in?
Manchester.
Manchester. So you bring up a really good point. If we're providing good AT services throughout, and we're documenting, we're considering AT for a student every year during their IEP and throughout their program. If we're doing it well, and now with technology and Google Docs, and you have an implementation plan or a consideration form, you can see what was trialed and what worked and what didn't over time, and what was successful or not successful. And so that's really all part of a district protocol and process for assistive technology. That's what can make it so powerful. And then also to know, okay, he tried voice recognition when he was in 3rd grade, but now he's in 8th grade, and guess what? The voice typing in Google is unbelievable. Let's try it again. It's really different. So sometimes it's good just to know what was tried in the past and how long ago it was tried.
And who tried it?
And who tried
If
it?
it was the
Yeah.
special ed teachers,
Right.
especially if it's, I'm thinking of, from our district, some of their more self-contained classrooms
Yep.
versus we just went to science class and everybody was doing it, and the motivation of the kid to do it because everybody else was doing it.
Right. I have this story. I was working with this student with mild autism, he would be considered Asperger's, and he was like 14, and I wanted to use voice recognition with him. It was when Siri had come out, Google voice typing wasn't, and I knew he'd used it in the past, and he had used Dragon Dictate, and I remember him telling me, I was explaining, about Siri, and I was actually using it to show him. I remember he said, I used Dragon Dictate a long time ago. It was not at all accurate. Like in his monotone voice, he was like, it was not at all. And I felt bad for him because I'm sure it wasn't at all accurate.
Yeah, and a lot of the kids, even ones without speech impairment, you have to speak really clearly
Yeah.
in order, so it can be frustrating too.
Yeah, it can, and it's
But
not.
Google Docs is better.
Google Docs is,
Yes,
is
way better.
amazing. Yeah. I always tell my friend Smita, I don't know if you guys know Smita from CREC, she does assistive technology there, and she's Indian, of Indian descent, and she also has cerebral palsy, so she's got a very strong Indian accent and has dysarthria on top of it, and she uses the voice typing as her main input. She has to correct it, but I mean, compared to, she tried Dragon, she's tried them all.
Yeah.
She uses the voice typing in Google.
Yeah.
Okay.
Want to give folks a chance to take a look at these?
Yeah, so the first two were resources from Connecticut. Have you guys seen these, the life skills inventory? So it wasn't necessarily totally related to AT, but we wanted you to take a look at it because it looks at the person as a kid as a whole, just things like money management, food management. You can take data on where the student is. We'll let you look at these in relation to these activities of daily living, really. And then what we like for it about AT is then you could say, okay, he's having a real hard time with managing his money. So how are we going to teach that? And that's how we might know then the student might require some AT for that particular skill. So we wanted to share this one with you. We'll go over a few of them, and then we're going to give you a few minutes to play. I'm assuming this one you don't have to look at really closely right now, but this is the Connecticut Core Transition Skills Package. If you haven't seen it, I'm assuming people who are in transition programs have, but I hadn't really looked at it before. It's just a really good resource for all sorts of information about transition in Connecticut. There was a task force, I think, last year. So, but then what Lisa, so definitely look at the life skills inventory and how you could relate it to your student in AT. Then, go ahead Lisa, did you want to talk about this one?
Sure. This is specifically regarding assistive technology, and this comes from a group that if you've done some other AT assessments, you might be familiar with WADI. So this comes in a few different parts. So this is somewhat similar to what Nicole showed you in that it looks at different areas of not just everyday life, but how is the student going to get around, what are the students' reading skills like, what are their writing skills like, and so if you find some concerns with regard to communication, computer access, any of those things, then you can follow up, like Nicole was saying, with assistive technology. And then it gets more into how is the student going to manage assistive technology. So if you could scroll back up for a second.
Sure.
So it even talks about problem solving. So if something goes wrong, does the student know enough about who they are as a learner, and can they, figure out what to do when something's not working? Who do I contact? What am I entitled to? Can I follow through when somebody else doesn't? You know, so it allows you to measure lots of skills that are pertinent to how a student might use assistive technology after they leave high school. So I thought this was a really good resource in addition to the ones Nicole had, because those were, you know, we've got transition as a whole, and now we're looking at specifically transition with regard to use of assistive technology.
And then I think there's one more, which is another student transition planning guide. It's a little more bare bones, but some people like this guide as well. So what we'd like you to do is, in the next few minutes, is take a look at the life skills inventory and then the 2 protocols right after that. And look at the, you know, tell us what the pros and cons are, tell us if you like them. And if you could think about even a student that you might be working with that's going to transition, how you would, you know, what might be your takeaways if you could run them through one of those protocols, which one would you pick? And what would the main takeaways be for that? Does that make sense? So I'm sorry, you can download them and then annotate on your computers if you want, or just take a few notes and you'll share out in a few minutes. We'll give you about 10 minutes to look at them all.
Yep, so you can look at them on your own or buddy up, whatever works best for you.
That transition planning guide?
Yeah.
So, it says I needed permission, is that on my end probably? I need
No,
permission to
hang
access
on.
it.
Which
Okay.
one? Which one, Sarah?
The very last one you reviewed, that third, that one right
That
now.
one.
Yeah.
This is like the new attachment.
Oh, okay, yep, I wasn't able to open that.
No, so let me make sure I've shared it. Yeah, because it defaults to CREC. Okay, now refresh it, you should be able to.
Okay.
Was this? Oh, there it is.
Okay, hopefully you're able to get to them.
It opened here.
What?
Yep.
It opened,
Opened.
good.
Yep.
I just had to
Good.
change it. My leg contact is,
Okay.
I'm gonna go run, I have it spare in the car.
All right.
I can't. I didn't set a timer, if you want to set a timer.
Okay, so,
I'm sorry, I'm so far
10
away
minutes?
from you.
Yeah.
okay.
What students?
So we'll look at these for about 10 minutes and then we'll share out.
I'll be right back, my contact is,
Can't find the code.
I can't win today.
I have to refresh it, maybe that's what I need.
I'm telling you, it's this month.
I don't have very long.
Diane, we're actually
Which
on
library?
a different PowerPoint, it's the same thing, but I put a new Bitly up, so maybe Lisa can share the Bitly with you, it's just Bitly AT transition, all one word.
There you
But
go.
she can maybe
Yeah.
share.
I'll put it
with
up
you.
on the screen.
Yeah, thank you. It's still the same content, but that one you had to make a copy, and this one is if we add more resources, you'll have it.
Yeah, okay. So, what kinds of,
Can you see
have
that?
you ever seen this checklist?
I'm not.
Is it big enough?
Really thorough, huh?
Yes.
This one is.
The first one, the life skills
inventory, is kind of cool, kind of impressive. I mean, I've been using, I just started using it last week.
What's that?
It's the transition planning inventory, second edition,
Oh, okay.
but I think it is.
Yeah, this is really important.
Okay.
This
Yeah.
basic, intermediate,
I
advanced, and
know.
excellent.
I like how linear it is, and then you would just set goals based on that, right?
I can't
Yeah.
seem to get on.
And
I don't believe so.
is it
Well, Lisa could
So
answer
what
that.
kind of jobs does he do right now?
Not gonna be on the network.
Mine remembered.
Job,
Email,
maintaining,
correct, you just
Correct,
email
yes.
to mailbox.
And what happens when you hit international planning? The
Yeah.
password is CREC learning exclamation.
So I don't have that.
about what houses
Yeah.
I look at. I don't know a lot of places do that. Look at
Yeah.
I might have done.
Not very.
I wanna check all these things, tell you what you're not gonna be able to do.
January, I
You're in?
think,
All right, good. Thank you. You're welcome.
student that we have in that's
Job
on the
seeking
unit.
is good, yeah.
So we're hoping to start.
So, sorry I didn't write a shirt.
Too
I
personal,
forgot.
is not needed.
Oh, it's okay. Did you write your name on that?
I did
is, yeah, okay, right on the sign in, just so we know who is here and can give you credit for it. Okay, because it would have been
Currency, parent data, calculator.
You know what, but you know what, we're live streaming and we're archiving the live stream, so they can get to this later. Let me get you the sign in.
Is it part of like a church? Is it the Plymouth Center School on North Street? It's attached to a church, but not that one, not that religious, or no, I don't know. Somewhere in the heart of it. Oh, so that's one of the things that we're looking at for him.
We've got 4 people live streaming right now, so we're just gonna archive that, so if you want people to view it afterwards.
Maybe that's if there was something kind of in the middle, huh?
Yeah.
In between the checklist and then that one pager, because this one's about that page.
Yeah, that one is probably not.
Thank you.
No, I was actually looking for that one. Where is that in
The first, the body one.
Oh, yeah. That one?
That
That
one
didn't
was,
even know where to start.
like, this one is really in depth, the life skills one.
Right.
It might be kind of cool to check it out,
So it
because
looks like for transition schools, it looks like
students are
there's
usually in the
like
school for 3
repository
years, the
of
transition programs, do like a before and after.
Right.
And so
and then guidepost for
skills they
success.
would.
True.
Or
Yeah,
preview.
baseline and beyond.
Okay.
I find it very frustrating that no one's done anything
With
at the
different
elementary or the middle school.
guideposts.
Because by
and
the
then
time you get there,
resources and
yeah,
assessments
by the time you
for
get to the high school level,
Not a
if the kids have been
Yeah.
easier classes, if they haven't been
arbitrary, right?
and you're like, no,
But
do
then
that.
you do it in the
It would be
science
lost.
or,
They
but
can't,
still,
how could they get from point A to point B? Good question. How can they do that? They can't get from your room to that room without.
Yes.
Oh.
So how do you do that? But other people don't think of it that way because they're there and they're managed and they don't understand how much the environment is modified for them to be successful. Because no one wants to say your kid can't do, you want to say your kid can do. This is where you're showing improvement instead of saying this is where we're still lagging behind. So by the time they hit high school, they have a huge gap and many parents, they don't have to go to their home. They don't necessarily difference.
Right.
And you're like, ooh.
So it would be nice by the time they get to high school too, it's like, well, I hate to say it, but we have a lot of kids that are in that kind of group where they're lower functioning, but they don't stand out, they're doing okay in their classes because they do the work, they look typical, but they're not necessarily college-bound students, and that's the expectation. They think, oh, my peers are
The
going to
first
college.
2 are
like,
about transition as a whole, and the last 2
but it
are
might be
just about
interesting
AT.
to have one of these checklists at a meeting and be like, okay, well, we're
I
still working
never
on
do
some
it
of
at
the
a
life
meeting.
skills.
I'm too afraid.
Yeah, exactly. I wouldn't
Too much
necessarily do
fear.
it either, but if
But
the
yeah,
teacher wanted to
if
do
the,
it, you know.
but even if you had, but like 3 different perspectives, and where do you see, and what environment are you in, and where does that happen, and where do you see your kid being most successful? Where do you see your kid having issues? They don't every time at a restaurant. I wonder why.
Right.
You know, and because people don't view it that way.
This you see, right?
And if that conversation, you wait until high school to start
Thing
that.
to attach to a student's folder.
Yeah.
That uses it.
That's why I think a lot of people,
Reviewed the
I know that's what we
Added
follow in
class.
I don't know how other
Yeah.
times do it, but there's not.
But in
There's
terms
a
of
real
assessment, yeah, maybe like a narrowed
disconnect in
down
the sense that,
checklist.
you know, middle school, we're
And is this
protected,
something
we're part of this
I'm
team or
looking
whatever,
also
now we're
for
independent, we're at the
some
high school. We might have this class and that class, and we
This
might
is
move.
something that would
Yeah.
like do they
Oh, yeah,
use
especially
the
next
Right.
something
time.
that is already in place?
Oh, here's your
something
wing,
that
no, we
they
don't have a wing
want
anymore,
to
we're in the
use
middle of the
or
building, but
take
we're still
full students out
crossed
for
off.
testing.
And it's frustrating because we have some teachers that think their students, I've worked so hard on this, they know everything. Every year I'm part of the communication social group, so we go once a week. And we tend to talk IEP. And the teacher is offended, one of them is offended every year. She's like, I went over the IEP, they never did that. I'm like, we're doing functional IEP.
Yeah, that's true, like a
Who's
log,
sitting
yeah.
at the table? What do you say to them when they ask you the question? What is your response?
Yeah.
What do you ask? Even if our
And
goal
that's
is to
like
walk
we're
in,
saying, since our
you walk in and say
population
hello.
is,
Make sure you introduce yourself because
for the
some
most
people
part,
might not know
people
you.
generally
You know, that kind of, it's just such a, it's a different perspective on on the skill.
Right.
And I think that's where we just get
Google Suite
up
stuff
against
like
the
that,
wall.
so it's not.
Yeah, no, that's a good point.
So maybe something like this would, but I would be curious to try it in the sense to see, like rating scales. How would they,
And honestly, for some kids, it's
Yeah.
Yeah.
like using computers and like electronics or impairment to get there.
That's pretty good.
Going back to the
we have an excellent teacher who did our vocational training, and she's now got all the kids in resource. She runs 5 resource classes a day, and they all have resumes and this whole list of stuff she does, and she makes them. She would be excellent doing this.
Yeah.
Kids shouldn't have.
That's what it sounds like.
We used to have in our everyday life skills program, there was a class specifically for this called community,
Okay.
but they've since changed the
Okay, couple
program.
more minutes.
So now it's like a science class and a math class, and I'm like, but I think that these skills are more important than that.
Right, the life skill piece, that's truly what life skills are.
Yeah, so it's covered a little bit within our social studies curriculum, but I liked how we actually had a whole class dedicated to it at one point, and they did checklists like this in all different areas. So that was like a lot of it was just figuring out what their strengths and weaknesses were, which I think even just finding that out in high school is great.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's go back to that.
Really? Yeah, yeah, it's good, yeah.
But what are you gonna do? We don't write the curriculum.
We complain about it.
Yeah.
We're not doing this differently. This is wrong.
All right. I know the timer hasn't gone off yet, but it seems like you guys have had a chance to look at them. Is that correct? All right. So what do you think? What did you like? Why did you like it? Is there a form that you preferred? How do you see yourself using this?
I liked the one that was more brief.
Okay, so in terms of AT or transition as a whole?
Well, I guess I'm thinking more of it for transition planning because that's the area I work in.
So I thought the life skills inventory?
Yeah, so I just thought it might be cool too to do like, like a baseline before they go into the transition program and then to see their growth as well. But I just thought it was cool how they had all the different areas.
Right.
It makes a lot of sense. The other one is good too. It's just very, very detailed.
Right.
So.
And so maybe this one's a little easier to collect data, but it's got some good behaviors that collect really nicely to goals and objectives.
Yeah.
Good.
Is that the life skills inventory, that first one?
The WADI.
Oh, the WADI
Yeah.
one.
Oh, the WADI, okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I like both of them too. I just think the life skills inventory is very, very in-depth, which would be probably good for the special education teacher and the parents to look at, but
you like this one?
yeah, it's more comprehensive, I think.
Great. Anybody else have a preference? One more person at least. I looked at him, I heard you talking about it.
I like the checklist on the WADI a lot, that it's not appropriate, possibly could use, using but could be improved or using independently. I think for some of our students that are lower functioning, that we're piloting the TPI, the Transition Planning Inventory 2 this year, and I'm not really liking it because it's very vague and arbitrary as far as the rating goes, but this is a little bit more specific that it's not appropriate for this student, but it may be, as another student may be using it independently, so it's not an arbitrary rating scale, but more of a yes, in fact, this is what we're looking at for student A, but not necessarily for student B.
Right. So I think that's a good takeaway is that there needs to be some type of data collection, and the type that you use can depend on who the user is. So you've got some nice choices there in terms of resources. Good. Anybody else want to add anything about those?
I'm just kind of wondering in terms of how this information is gathered from the student, because when I'm looking at it, it also depends on how you ask the question and how much the student is actually aware of their ability or their knowledge of those things. So I could definitely see a student be like, yeah, I know that, and then do you mark yes? It's like, or it's like even not the WADI, but for the life skills inventory, how it's like a check of which of these things do you know. So it's like how in depth do you get by asking, do you know about this? Is that kind of like, are you telling them about it, or is that something they should bring up on their own? So that's part of it.
I think that's a great question, and I think depending on the student, there might be some students who you can gather good information from, but I don't know if anybody would remember this, but I remember when we first started doing like the old CMT, there was a checklist that you did with students, and you had to actually do the task with them to sort of get a feel for what it was they knew and could do and how much support they required. So I think for some kids, that might be the way to check off the boxes here, is to either observe the student in a situation where they're using that skill, or to actually create the situation and see how they perform.
We were kind of talking about too, it might be interesting to see different ratings from different people in their environment to see, do they know the skill, or is it just, you know, depending on the situation, and I thought that was a good point then.
Yeah, excellent, good.
I think it's a great point, especially when we saw before, you know, research shows that just because they're using it in one area, they're not going to use it, might not be using it well in another environment. I mean, it's just the same thing across people, across contexts. And I think it would be really hard to just go by a student's answer, for sure. So to definitely be able to observe, talk to other people, that type of thing, would be really helpful. Yeah.
Great, so now you've got some resources that you can take back to your district, and hopefully you'll share that with your colleagues, and so that you can come up with at least a process, not necessarily pick one form, but establish a process so that you can start making that plan, so that you can plan for how this transition is going to take place, and then start working on, you know, how are the materials going to move with the student, who's going to be responsible for making that change from one place to the next, how are you going to help with funding, all of that stuff. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the law.
Yeah, we were going to really just kind of go through it a bit quickly, because y'all can read the law, right? And I know some of you are probably real experts in it. But when we wanted to talk about, you know, assistive technology is not always specifically mentioned in the law when we talk about transition, but of course it's weaved into everything we do as special educators. So, you know, we know that transition is services are supposed to be a coordinated set of activities. And of course, we're really talking about not going from school to school, but we're talking about going from school to employment or school to college. And so you know, the law definitely talks about how we have to facilitate those movements in any way, shape, or form we can. Whether it's employment, continuing education, independent living. And so transition services are still based on a student's individual needs, right? And so when we're looking at what we have to provide for a student in terms of transition services, we're going to take into account their strengths, their preferences, their interests, but also we're going to talk about, you know, what are the tasks that they have to complete, and what AT do they need to be successful. I know there's a whole, and that's one thing I never really get, the post-school outcome goal, right, the PSOG, whatever they're called. I know that those are super important for kids when they're transitioning, and so I know that we have to do that, but I always try to talk about, you know, when we're looking at those post-school outcome goals, what AT does that student need to be successful there. So before looking at anybody have anything else to add about the law? We just wanted to put it in there just so you guys knew these are the types of services we need to provide in terms of IDEA and transition. But anybody, especially some of you experts in transition, does anybody have anything to add based on those slides? Any comments or anything? No. Okay.
I'm curious. Do most of the students you have go into other agency areas, or do you have a lot of people that do go to work? Because I think most of the kids we have don't go to work. They're either going into a different agency, or they might be going to a community college or something like that.
I think we've had like one student get a job instead of most of them going to agencies. We've had like one student successfully get employment.
It's hard, I know.
It is, yeah.
Well, and you guys have kids who are going to college and possibly work.
We have a combination. We have one that's in college 2 days a week and comes to the transition program 3 days a week. We have a couple that have gone into jobs, and we have some that have gone into day programs or supported work environments.
Right.
It's like a little bit of everything.
Okay, so don't look at the next slide, but we did want to talk about, what's the difference? So I know some of your students are going into agencies, but, and if they are, there's still some skills, of course, that they need when they go into those agencies to be successful, and then when they graduate or move on from those agencies. But what's the real big difference when we talk about transition, for the supports that are out there for kids going to college, employment, and agencies? What's the difference between what we do in the school environment and what happens when they leave us, and possibly into those agencies too? So what's the difference in support? So talk amongst yourselves, and and then we'll talk about the impact of the differences of support on assistive technology and transition.
That's how I move forward.
There's a lot more choice in what they want to do when they're out of school.
I think in terms of the support, college, they can apply for the disability
At the same time, if they have a commitment, they don't have rolling deadlines like many students have in school, where it's like, just make it up when you can. That doesn't really exist in the work. Or if it's right, or a job,
but it's not like you have a person necessarily with you, which I think some of our kids are used to.
Flexibility and deadlines, and I feel like in school there's a lot more
It's still college level of work.
They can take it to like
and that might not apply if they get hired
underneath
full
that,
time.
so I don't know,
That pressure
so I'm
of
not
this
like.
is not
Okay,
flexible.
yeah.
But my understanding is some of our kids that go into instances, they're audited.
When I'm doing
Speaking
my
Right.
because they really couldn't take it
career
without
bound or
modifications.
Right,
They don't do that anymore.
just to get the experience, to get,
reducing
Right.
we don't get into that, but yeah.
is going to be in a supported work
But it depends, because like if they're an agency, obviously they're going to be receiving a lot of support still, but not necessarily, they're not getting that social
It depends how much their parents push too.
That's right, yeah.
Because, right.
Because that's always key, whether there's somebody, advocating for them. Because most of the kids don't on their own, although we have had some kids that have. I don't know.
It's been difficult, like, over the past 3 or 4 years with BRS. It's been hard to get kids accepted into different places, I think too, because of funding and things like that, so that's been an issue too. But, for most of our really low functioning students, they end up getting the support they need. I think it's
There's
just
two
that
other
middle
people
ground of like,
on Fairfield and
What happens when you turn 21?
So
That's what, there's nothing, and that's the
Right.
whole, right, because
Unless they're already in, like, like an agency.
but even from an agency, they don't,
I have a friend
they
who
want sheltered
had
work.
to
If
in
the,
high school
if
and
the
then
agency is
college.
able, like DDS is able to provide their own setups, they can move them into slots. But
Yeah.
if they have, openings, but for kids we have that are pretty functional, job ready, they've been job coached, they may have an iPad, they may have a phone, they have something to
And that's like the
use.
professor can modify things,
The
but
best you can get from BRS is, well, if you can find a job, we'll try to provide a
let the
coach.
professor know what their
Right.
needs
We
are
can't
ahead
find
of
a
time,
job,
before the course
first of all, we're
begins.
done.
Or,
But
before
if
maybe start
we don't
signing.
have a
And
connection
then
to
seeing some,
companies,
like usually
Right.
professors are cool,
So
oh,
then
thanks
the
for letting me
kids
know,
stay at
I'll
home.
keep that in mind, but that also.
It used to be, like when I first started
A lot of
5
students aren't
years
used
ago,
to
BRS used to
kind
be a
of
lot more
doing
helpful
that's
with that. I felt like they were able to take
practice that.
yeah.
Cause that's totally what you do in a professional.
And we have so many new people that they don't even know the area where we are.
You contact the
So
right
they don't
person,
know-
and you
they
have
don't
to
have
figure out
it.
if
One more
they
minute.
can see me and how do I
Like assisted technology
voice my
support, I don't
needs.
think they really get anything after 21 unless it's through the family.
Right.
So,
I've had kids get FMs for college, because I'm a
that's a
teacher
good
with
point.
that.
Yeah.
So I have had that, but not always, and usually it's a fight between will the college provide or will BRS provide. And some colleges, like St. Joe's, will be like, oh, we're such a welcoming community, we will give you what you need. And no, we have to,
Yeah.
and then others be like, no, it's real.
Because her emails are accommodations, like that's like accommodation.
But it's still a couple $1,000s out of their budget. Well, you have to have somebody monitor it if there's something breaks or whatever, so it's not, it's an easy one, but it's not as easy as it looks to begin with, because, once it's broken, what do you do?
that one doesn't, that
And
really
then
doesn't
who do you give
work
it
for
to,
me.
and how do you get it back up?
Right.
No. Some of the local schools around here have been pretty good about it, because Soundbridge is here, and they'll do a follow-up to it, but other than that, Southern used to be really good. I haven't had a student go there for a long time. The last student I had, they were excellent.
Right.
Responsibility.
You work
For implementation?
No, I work in
They're
public
going to
schools.
implement. It's not like here where they see it.
I forgot to tell you.
I
And it broke, so it's really defective. But now you have us throughout our.
A professor could go the whole year without realizing that anybody in the course has
in Torrington, or you've been with one student?
No, I have like 12 students, and like I just started with another 3-year-old. So I've gone with them to the transition programs, because the transition program, you know, our LARC program, Highlander, which is up in, Region 7, they don't have any consultation for what do you do with a kid with hearing loss. That was different from so I tend to go to the transition program.
All right, let's wrap that up. I heard some really good discussions.
But she does the whole district.
Yeah. So so let's talk about the main differences, and then if you guys had other things that popped up, go for it. But what are some main differences between the support we provide through IEPs in the schools and then when kids transition?
They're responsible for advocating. I think that's the biggest thing we talked about is they're responsible for advocating for themselves, whether it be that they need a break when they're feeling overwhelmed, or they need accommodations within the classroom.
Yep.
There's nobody to run interference between them and their professors, or them and their boss.
Yep, they totally have to be self-determined, right? I mean, I have a friend now who she's a bit of a control freak. She has a typical son, but I mean, the bursar won't even talk to her, you know, and then the son did not sign off that they could, so they she's in therapy and it's okay. But it's hard as, you know, I think about her, but then I think about parents of kids with disabilities too, and how they've really, you know, worked hard at probably advocating for their kids, and that's a whole new ballgame. So they have to advocate for themselves. When you go to college, they have to, first of all, right, self-identify, right? And then they have to say, here's what I need. And that's hard for kids. Anything else over here?
Funding?
Yeah. Funding is a whole different, right? What are the agencies? It's different people, it's different places. At the college level, I don't know how much you guys have experience with this, but let's say a kid's using Read and Write for Google very well, or Read and Write for Chrome very well in high school. Does a college have to provide Read and Write for Google? No, they don't. What do they have to provide?
Nothing.
No, not true.
They provide the features of it.
Correct. They have to provide the features, but if they have Kurzweil and that's meeting the features, it still has text-to-speech and picture dictionaries and blah, 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 blah. They do not have to provide the same exact accommodation. So, and some colleges absolutely say this is what we use. We've invested in Kurzweil. I don't know if you've experienced that. I know I used to work at UConn. I used to work at the Center for Students with Disabilities, and they had a great program. This was a long time ago when I was in college, but this is what we provide. So you've got to get on the stick or have it yourself.
Right, and when kids are looking at colleges, that's one of the first things they need to do is they need to go to the school's website, because it spells out, here are the tools that we use, here are how you're going to access them, this is the kind of device we recommend that you have, so all that stuff is spelled out on the school's website.
If they have good support. Some don't.
That's true.
And I was just at one university in Connecticut that I won't name. They were looking to get rid of note takers. So they have student note takers, right? They were looking to replace as many as they could with LiveScribe pens, which we're going to look at the LiveScribe pen later. It's a great tool, but is it the same as a note taker and a student who's there taking notes for themselves? Right? And Lisa's shaking her head, absolutely not. And so that was a whole argument, and they ended up not doing that, but they ended up using the LiveScribe and teaching some kids how to use it, so they actually didn't necessarily need to rely on a note taker, which was good, but you certainly can't replace student note takers for every single. But those are the conversations that happen, too, because they're trying to make kids as independent as possible. That was a fiscal thing though, because they pay the student note takers.
Yeah.
So, yeah, as a whole. Any other comments or questions that came about based on that? Yeah, your discussion?
I really don't have a lot of experience with transition. I'm here to learn. But at the college level, I mean, you don't really have like a case manager or anything. You just have a 504 plan.
Mm-hmm.
And then like if you require a note taker,
Yep.
for example, that would be written in your plan. And I mean, the student has to make sure somebody sets that up.
So yeah, there's usually a center for students with disabilities or a disability, a support center. They're named. What was that?
They have a coordinator.
Right. There's usually some again at UConn, it's a huge office, and they will help coordinate. You identify through them. They will review your documentation. They'll look at your IEP. They'll look at your 504. They'll look at your accommodations from the past. And if they don't see anything in it, they don't have to, it's very hard to actually get accommodations. Sometimes if you have a doctor's note, they'll review physician information, that type of thing. But they like to look at, and this is something to really think about, what was he using in high school that was making him successful? If there wasn't something there, it's a little sketchy because do you really need it now when you didn't need it in high school? So that's why we're always really careful when a kid is transitioning out. We want to be very specific about the features that this kid needs to be successful. Not just for AT, but accommodations, right? This student needs priority seating. This student needs to be able to register in small classes. Sometimes they'll do that for you. So, but they will look at all of your documentation to make the decisions about what you get. Some of the kids get priority registration based on physical disability or based on class size sometimes. So they'll get extended time. But it's not unlimited. I think it's usually just time and a half, right?
Yeah. We've asked the college reps to come to your high school. It's a nice training area for some of your students to go in and sit down and talk to someone. Because usually it's one-on-one and say, young, friendly people that are happy to have someone to talk to. And it's been a good way for kids to start to realize what's available. And a lot of times the reps have no idea.
That's what I would think.
But it's good because all of a sudden the kids are like, well, what do you mean you don't know? Don't they have it? Because they assume everybody knows everything about it all. So then they realize, no, we've got a connection. Maybe they'll call you back or maybe you need to ask someone else. But that's a good starting place we found for some kids.
I know, I was just thinking, also like these kids have to get into these colleges without any exceptions.
Right.
Like a UConn student, Center for Students with Disabilities, it must be really hard for those students to get into UConn because typical kids with great grades don't get into UConn. So I'm just processing all of it, thinking what a mixed bag it all is.
And the Center for Students with Disabilities at UConn, and I think mostly they don't see the kids until they're admitted and coming, and then they and I know UConn has a whole autism program to help support social needs and stuff like that. They have tutoring services in general, but especially for kids with learning disabilities. They used to have a whole learning disability center, and now it's all under one. So there are tutors and there's support there depending on your school. So it's something you really have to work with your students on. And I have some kids that go to Landmark for a year or two. That college was set in Vermont.
Yeah, I don't remember.
You haven't
Exit 4.
Is it exit 4?
We drive by.
Is it Vermont?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a college basically for kids with learning disabilities, and so some I think it's 4 years, right? Is it? But I've had kids go there for the first year or two, and they have a lot of assistive technology, a lot of support. So again, it just depends on your student. We're getting even further from assistive technology, but there are supports put in place, and it's just a matter of what's available at each university.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And a big part, too, besides the college, is the other side, where the students who have more significant needs that will be going to day programs, they're probably not going to get one-to-one attention. And that's a huge problem in the school district because we give our most needy kids one-to-one support, so they have somebody all day long to sit with them and help them and do this and that. And when they're moving to a day program, a lot of times it's one staff to 4 people, 3 people. So that's been a big eye-opener for my program, from my perspective, in trying to help our students who are ready to graduate to learn how to occupy their own time when they're ready to exit.
Leisure. You've done so much with leisure. That's a big deal.
Very big deal.
Yeah, and following a schedule and knowing, right, okay, if I'm bored, what can I do? I'm sure you're looking at a lot of visual supports, or all those things to help them be as independent as
How do
possible.
I provide my own sensory integration?
Yeah.
How do I provide my own entertainment? How do I keep myself occupied between long periods of time, downtime, because there are significantly long periods of downtime in the day programs.
Yeah. I worked at one a long time ago. And an outpatient day program for people with disabilities. So it's actually why I'm a speech therapist and not a special educator now, actually. Well, because I met so many kids, adults, 25 and on, that could not communicate, could not communicate their needs. And I remember being sad every day. And my aunt, who was a special educator, said, you might want to go into speech instead of special ed. And I was like, what's speech? Really not. So then,
And then look what happened.
exactly.
Do you wanna take a break?
Yeah, so why don't we, let's go through, we're gonna go through this part.
Okay.
The research part in 1:30, we'll take a break.
Okay.
Is that okay? So I guess you guys heard that. We'll take a break at 1:30 and then we'll come back and look at tools. So we talked about the research part together already. So we're gonna fly through this pretty quickly, but we wanted to make sure you all knew, what is best practice when we start talking about AT and transitions, because it looks a little different than having our kids just access the curriculum, right, and be independent during their school day. And there's some skills that we don't always consider. The first skill is definitely, and feel free to jump in, Lisa, self-determination. So they need to be able to do all of these things around assistive technology, and you just brought that up. I'm sorry, what was your name? Tammy. Oh, Tammy Card.
Yes.
Right, okay, yeah. Visual, I put it together, what's that? So not just for assistive technology, but in general, and you talked about acting autonomously, being able to self-regulate. Are they empowered? Are they, self-realizing what they have to do? This is individuals who have high self-determination, just in general. It's studies a while ago now, but they're twice as likely to be employed. They have better salaries. They're more likely to gain job benefits, etc., because they're self-determined. So these are just ways to teach self-determination. Obviously, improving the way they can make choices, decisions, problem solving, setting goals, and self-regulation and self-management, which we're going to look at a lot of those tools in a little bit.
And when you hear that term, self-determination, the other term that you could use interchangeably with that, and that you've heard a lot too, is executive function skills.
Right.
So all of those things that describe self-determination are really good executive skills.
Yep. So self-determined AT users can make their choices about AT. I'm sorry, there's a little thing over that, but basically it says, for language arts, I'd rather use my probably laptop at my desk than sit at the computer in the back of the room, or keyboard at my desk. So people are able to make choices about their AT use. I've seen, individuals who use a bunch of different ways to communicate, right? So I worked with an individual who, when he was at dinner with his friends, he was using a letterboard. He wasn't using a high-tech AAC device. It was too loud. He felt people were not loud enough. He felt people were eavesdropping, so he could spell. But then when he was at work and he was, talking to people, he was using his AAC device, his high-tech device. So to be able to give people choices over the AT they can use based on context is really helpful. And, we talk about kids who use AAC, right, and with their familiar partners, some students might not need it, or might only need it as a backup. But then when they're interfacing with a bunch of people that are strangers, guess what? They need to use that iPad to communicate. And we need to teach kids when to do that. Some learn it on their own. I have a girl who, she sees me coming and I see her pull out her iPad and she's like, oh, I'm mad, because a lot of the people that know her can understand her, or she uses gestures or spells, but I don't know her, and she's 5 years old. And so, and she knows, she sees me coming and I see her, she gets ready, oh, I gotta use my iPad for this one, she's too stupid to understand me. It's really what she is, she like rolls her eyes. One day I came in, she handed it to me, it was broken, she's all mad. But she's, I mean, she's self-determined already, and she understands very strategically that, you know, I need to use this here, I don't need to use it there. We had a student, in Plymouth who knows sign. She doesn't live in a deaf community, but I think she's gotten, maybe I could be wrong, but she knows the people she could sign with and who she can't sign with, and so she signs with the people that she can, and it's quick and easy, and let's let her do that. But then for the rest of the world that isn't in her environment, she uses her AAC device. That one's a little bit easier because it's easy to tell who can't sign, which is mostly everybody. So, you can solve problems with it. So we need to teach our kids. So what happens if I can't hear my text-to-speech? It sounds really simple, but if they can't troubleshoot with you, there's no way they're going to be able to do it out in the environment. We have to teach them those skills, how to make things louder, what happens if it breaks, who do I call, where are my touch points. Self-determined users can set goals as well, regulate and manage their own performance, advocate for themselves, right? We talked about that already. And this is a really good resource. We're not going to have you look at it today, but you can click on it for sure. It's, hey, can I try that? Has anybody used that? Mm-hmm. We recommend it a lot. It's from Wadi, again. It's a little outdated in terms of the technology that they use. Oh, look at that, it's not, the link is broken. We'll make sure to put it on there. But it basically looks at the kids' AT and what they're using and how they like to use it and in what situations. So it's actually a really, Lisa, you're gonna do that? Thanks. Lisa's gonna put the link up there now. It's a really awesome resource for kids and teams to look at. So obviously our kids need to be independent. And you mentioned before, I'm sorry, what was your name?
Alex?
Alex, what are the tools that you're using right now in your life? What are they to be independent as a human? What are they?
I like to use Google Calendar, that's like the backbone, just to keep track of dates and important things. And I guess the Google suite, making sure all the information, I can access it from my phone, which is, I always have on me, so no matter what, you can check calendar, email, all that stuff.
Yep, what else? What else are other people using to be independent?
My phone, always.
So how are you using your phone?
Reminders, calendar, email, all that stuff.
What else?
Calendars, sticky notes, just that old-fashioned stuff that works. Remember stuff.
And have we ever outgrown them?
Not me.
No. I mean, my daughter needs medicine every night. Every night she's supposed to be getting this medicine. I mean, I have an alarm on my phone, my husband's phone, her iPod Touch, and my watch. Like the watch is from the phone. And it's still amazing how there's still some days we're running up the stairs trying to get rid of it. But it's just, we all use technology to be independent, so we need to make sure our students are as well. There are 4 different ways to be an independent AT user. These are the 4 different competencies. So actually you can even go ahead and break down AT into these 4 different competencies. It's based off of actually AAC work. The first one is operational. And that's just the things, do they know how to operate the device themselves? I know kids that are presented with their iPads and it's turned on. Do they know how to turn it on? Do they know how to unlock it? Do they know how to charge it? These are all competencies that we want to try to teach our kids. And these are things that we don't necessarily think about. But as they're transitioning, we want to teach them to take ownership. Make sure, and that starts, when they're 5 years old. You take your device with you. Make sure they're taking their device with them. They're taking ownership. And can they operate the device with as little help as possible? And if they need help, how do we adapt it? Is it checklists? Is it a visual schedule? I'm not sure, depending on the kid. But we definitely work on those skills with kids, with cognitive disabilities. If they're using their iPads, show them this is what you have to do to take ownership over it. Has anybody worked on any of these skills with students? Yeah. Do you have an example?
Well, I have a high school student that just got an iPad for AAC.
Yep.
This last year,
Mhm.
so with her, I think just knowing these simple skills, she has Down syndrome.
Yep.
But that's a level of independence for her where she still needs help with a communication partner, but
Yep.
having her set it up by herself,
Mhm.
taking it out, she can turn it on and off. I think that's been more helpful for her, and she can tell me if there's something wrong with it too.
Yeah. And you're her person. Now there might be, she might never be able to contact assistive wear.
Yes.
You would hope she would, but does she know to tell someone, I need help with this?
Yeah.
You know, and that might be a wonderful way to help her be independent. Of course, we wanna try to adapt that to see if she could contact assistive wear at some point, but to make sure that we're getting there as close as possible is wonderful. Anybody else who teaching? Yeah,
I
Tammy?
have a young, well, she's 14, so a young woman now that I've been working with for 4 years outside of school who
Mhm.
has nonverbal autism.
Mm.
And I downloaded an app on my phone when I first discovered that she had no way of communicating and her behaviors were off the chart.
Mm.
This was when she was 9 and 10 years old, so I downloaded a free app on my phone, and now 4 years later, she can give it to, she'll go in my purse, she'll get the phone, she'll hand it to me, she'll say help.
Mhm.
I'll turn it on, and then she can adjust the volume if the volume's not,
Mhm.
if the volume's turned down, because when I leave work, it's still turned down, so
Sure.
now she's learned how to adjust the volume. She
Yeah.
can manipulate through it, and if I take something off of one screen, she will find out where it is. If she really wants to go to BJ's, she's gonna figure out where, but it is amazing to see over the 4 years that I've worked with her, that, and if she can't find it, she'll come up to me and say, phone, which is something she never did before.
Right.
Phone, help,
Mm-hmm.
and then just move through the app, which is, it's been a godsend,
Mhm.
and of course, will her family put it on?
Oh.
That's a whole other
Yeah.
story,
Right.
but it's perfect, it's totally free, and it is just.
Which one is it, Sounding Board?
No, it's called Jab Talk,
Jab Talk.
and it's available on Android, and it is completely free, you can
Great.
download Google.
Yeah.
Pictures, I even have a picture of her home that I downloaded from Google.
From Google Maps.
Yes, but it is,
Oh,
it's
how
like the
funny.
greatest device ever, but it's hysterical
Yeah.
how quickly she learned how to be like, this is my voice, and now you're gonna take me to Friendly's, and you're gonna get me sauteed mushrooms, and that's that. Sauteed mushrooms, every day, every Saturday for the past 6 months.
That's cool that even some of our students with lower cognition, they really learn how to program these apps. And like, I'll go in and she has a picture of her grandma that she loves, and it's her background now. But I was like, she did that on her own. It's so cute.
Yeah, and that's a way, here, I just found it, Jab Talk.
Oh, it's so great.
That's a way to personalize, right, and give it some smile value. Is that what it looks like?
So it looks like this on my phone.
Is it that?
It looks like that, it
Yeah.
looks like this on my phone, and then we have underneath the buttons, car,
I want to eat at.
and then we have all the restaurants where she likes to go, and she knows how to move back and forth, or
I want
what
to
she
eat.
wants to eat,
You're
and it's
such
all
a speech
pictures.
therapist.
My other life.
You are.
That's cool though, because it's kind of like Go Talk, but you can have it on your phone.
Exactly,
which is awesome.
exactly.
Yeah.
And then we argue using it. I don't wanna go to Friendly's, I wanna go somewhere else, no.
Enough of the sauteed mushrooms.
I can tell you everything that's on the menu at Friendly's.
It's not impressive.
No, it's really not.
I had a bottomless shrimp experience at Friendly's and haven't been back. It's been about 3 years. Well, my parents live in a retirement community, and their Friendly's is their big. And my kids think it's the best place in the world. You know, it's just free ice cream and stuff. Yeah, so I think about Friendly's like
Bottomless shrimp, oh boy.
yeah, they have it there. It's
But I highly recommend this, there are students that use phones for communication.
absolutely
I highly recommend this because it is so easy to
quick.
use.
Yeah.
So easy, it's actually easier to use this than Proloquo.
Yeah, it looks like it, but it also looks simpler too, in that it's right,
Yeah.
it's some quick interpret, which is great. So there's also functional competence, right? So that's really the, just what they're actually doing, what are the features that the student needs, and what are they going to be, how are they going to be using it functionally? So what will they need to do in order to keep, so your student there, the functional competence is, she's making choices, right? She's being, and that's how she's using it with you. And just as an aside, I don't know what the family situation is, but sometimes a videotape of her using it goes a long way.
Oh, they see me use it right in front
Oh,
of
they
her.
do, okay,
Yeah.
done. So strategic competence, that's what I was referring to really before, about how am I gonna use this strategically in my environment. So that one student, she is the most strategic AAC user I've ever seen. She doesn't use the iPad with, her one-on-one all the time. She's had to clarify, but with me, she's using some strategies. Also, an example of a strategy could be, what do you do when this device is not working? What's my backup? That type of thing. Those are all considered strategies, strategic ways to use your AT. And then the last but not least is social. It's really self-advocating for your needs. There is some social competence when you start talking about AAC too. One of the biggest ones is an introduction strategy. So teaching our kids, hey, I use this AAC device to tell someone to talk, give me a minute or give me 10 seconds while I compose my message, something like that. That's a really good strategy when they start going out into the community and the environment. We still, an AAC device is still not typical, right? We still don't see that all the time. So to give your kids, and I can put a resource up there, a way to introduce how they communicate is super empowering for them. It's a social skill, and then also it helps their communication partner understand. It's giving them some strategies to say, okay, I just need to wait, and they're going to tell me with this, and I'm just going to pause. We used to practice this I used to work at a school for kids with disabilities in New Jersey. New Jersey has tons of private schools for kids with significant disabilities, and we lived in the school was in a very urban area, so we would go and practice our AAC use because the school was it was small, so the kids got really good at using their AAC with their staff and their peers. So we'd go out into the community, and I'll never forget it. We went to this Dunkin' Donuts. We would take orders, and then they would have to communicate. At first we were modeling, and then we were stepping back, and then I realized we had trained the Dunkin' Donuts workers so well. They were so lovely that one day we came in, and there was a new person there, and the other one was like, you have to pause and wait, like she was like telling, so it was so funny because they weren't even an unfamiliar partner anymore because we trained them all to be, but it was a great experience. And then we had to go to the laundromat and do all sorts of other things, but those were ways. Those kids were transitioning out. They were transitioning to employment. Most of them that were not going to college, they were either going to a day program or they were going to work, and we were trying to teach them those skills just to be able to, order a coffee by themselves, order at the restaurant. We were at the local restaurants all the time, but you just have to be careful because sometimes your unfamiliar partners turn familiar, and then you gotta change it a little bit. And then of course there's AT, transition planning, and the IEP. So we kind of talked about that already to meet the IDEA requirements. And is it 15 in Connecticut? I always forget the age when we're supposed to.
14.
Is it 14 now? When we have to start? Yeah, we're one of the youngest because some it's 16 some states. So I guess it's state specific, not federal. I don't know. Does anybody know that?
It says right in the IEP, doesn't it?
It says in the Connecticut IEP.
Right.
Yes. But I know it's different. It's been different in other states. So I don't know if that's a state thing or not. I don't know. We can look it up. All right, any questions? All right, so we gave you a lot of background, but we thought it was important to make sure you guys knew, what to consider when you're using AT with your students. So let's take like a 7-10 minute break. Then we're going to come back. It's going to be all hands-on with tools for the last half, okay?
Thanks.
All right.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know, actually, I didn't really get one more. I have to get it out.
Yeah.
Yeah, the last time our speech pathologist from the high school was able to come, but she had like
Put the key back in the money
needs today. So she's like, that's not gonna work.
If you go over to
Somebody else had to get back because to get from Hartford home was too, the kids had to get off the bus and she could
Yeah,
get there. That kind of thing
So
happened.
Oh, you're welcome.
that's awesome.
Yeah, you weren't here to type in the.
Yeah, my director sent us out like last week.
She did,
And I think I was the only one that jumped on. I
She
was like, yeah,
put
sure.
it very
I don't have a
quick,
meeting
very
this afternoon,
quick,
so.
kind of
That's what they say, I've come off
she
and
almost
on
felt
for
like work allowed.
10 years, I think. Some more than others, but so frequently when you come, they go through these great things.
Progress
Oh,
and like that. And
oh,
kind of like admitted to the rest.
and I said, well, see, I don't know high school because they're like the left behind crowd.
Oh, yeah.
So what is that in so many different ways? And it's like, oh, she's been to our high school more than once.
So
And she's like, yeah, okay, I know what you mean.
log that I use with
I agree
them.
with that too.
So this is upstairs.
Okay.
There's a weekly reflections that are attached.
Yeah.
How, everything.
I know, we don't have it like, we don't have medical reports on
Chunk
how much she
assignments,
receives.
so like a breakdown of deadlines, it's like multiple different ones. Roadmap, she didn't like that it was on paper, she was
Okay.
like,
So I
means
thought
everything's
she
been
was going to
electronic,
go
why
through
isn't
the
this
process of
digital?
requesting an evaluation.
I'm
She
like,
reached out by email and I
Well, I
said,
told her, well, explain that
Yes.
to you,
Go through
how to
together.
go through the process.
she almost missed the boat because
this is the
she
one that
just
has
did that like at the end of last week. I'm like, well, just so happens.
So this
because
is
this was gonna be
this is the
Friday,
log that they do, so they come in, they say what they're working on, and
Yeah,
then
I had
blah,
Penny
blah, blah.
send home
So
permission,
one mom
to
sends
share, so the parents should have signed off, so the Nicole can
She's
load
like, why
the
she
files,
determines
she
that
can actually
instruction,
see
you
the
should be the one
child.
that's based on her, tell her what she's gonna work on.
Okay, you
And
already
then
know
I'm
she
just
needs
like,
it.
well,
Okay, so
it's
I'll
both,
tell Nicole,
but
it's
like,
this is nice, you get a little
Courtney
sneak
still
peek
needs to
before
come
we
in and
actually
part of
sit
her
down.
self-advocacy, say, what do I want, what do I need to work on, and then
But
there's times where I'm like,
CPT
Courtney,
is next week.
come over here, we'll do
According
something
to
together,
him,
so
like-
that doesn't
Or something
show
like
up
that,
here,
right?
because
Isn't
this,
it right
I
on the
still
corner?
expect Courtney to
You know, I
figure out
think
what
that
she
would
needs
be
to work on,
nice.
whether or not we're working on something
Speaking of
locally.
Google,
Yeah.
let me check
Yeah.
your high school calendar.
Yeah.
Here's what I need from my professor today, like, you know.
So it's like, well, I can appreciate you
So,
dealing times.
are we looking
It
for
seems as though there are no prepared
you
teacher
want her
directed
to have
lessons directly linked to her IT,
literacy,
so
like access to
there's no
literacy, or you want
reason
leisure, or you want
If there is, I
communication?
literally copied everyone, okay? This is the thing, why is it handwritten?
And you know, she did a
Electronic
consult on Ryan Cook,
So whatever, I
which,
just won't write anything handwritten for me again.
Yeah,
Not a
I'm
big deal.
going, I don't know
This
anything
is what
about
the one that,
handwriting.
oh, okay,
so
you
put
never
it
really
into
worked with him on the board.
and
Okay,
what
you
I
can't
did
do it
with
with
you,
but it's what
Courtney was
I
looking at it, it seemed like, I'm like, well, what do you have to do? Like, she was like, oh, I have to know about
Sue
these three
hasn't
classes
really
of
done
animals,
any of the
and they were
follow-up
just like their
stuff, so, like-
classes and their characteristics.
Okay.
I'm like, well, one of the
Nicole,
goals is
even on Friday, I see
retention
how
for
he's
long
doing well,
term.
no
And I'm
different.
like,
He's no
you.
different than when you were here
let me at
2 months
least
ago.
gather what she knows and what she doesn't. So we kind of did one thing where I'm like, okay, I gave her different characteristics and she had to name which class it belonged to, and then I reversed it. I gave her a class and she had to name characteristics about it. So part of that was to assess like what she knows, but also it's like flashcard, like
Right.
just give me, it's a very basic way.
Yeah,
And then I did
Tuesday.
like a visual
So-
retention strategy where it's like, okay,
Alright,
instead of
well,
thinking
this
about
is
the
a
name
no-brainer.
of the class, think of an image of an animal in that class. And by visualizing the animal, then you can already think, oh, well, that one doesn't have
now
scales.
requesting a
Yeah.
full-blown.
So we use that strategy.
Exactly.
Oh, she
She did poorly on the quiz, but she was not.
So what,
Like, but like,
and it's not
everybody, it was
necessarily
the zoology one on the
we're not
first,
looking at
but everyone
everything.
everything. And then, because that the teacher allowed Courtney to come in and like make modifications, and Courtney then got me an 80 based on it. So
Like literacy, how can we
moms will
audio
send it.
books versus
The long-term retention strategies are not because of
I listened to
Dr. J.
her,
Gordon
Kara
Gordon,
told me
the article
that
use
if
of
she
flashcards was
spells,
directly addressed to Dr. J. Gordon as being
like
ineffective
nurse,
measure.
for example.
I'm like, I don't remember that, how am I supposed to know? Lowest quiz on record.
Rice.
My understanding is that she needed help answering
Like
logic
that.
clues, as if she has to know the reason why
Okay.
she thought.
So over the summer, I changed it to nurse, mom, dad, some functional. So what Tim Lister was telling me is that she would spell NURSE and hold up a card, what does that spell? And Chrissy would say, no. MOM, what does that spell? And she would hold up a card with the word and she'd say, mom. So we adapted, like a discrete trial, we kind of got her to be able to do that kind of
Yeah,
lesson.
like that kind of literary.
And she's, I think just recently asked her like the first 5 words, but of course I don't know how consistent. Some of the over and stuff. She said her mom, she looks at it in color, so she thinks that makes a difference. All of the pictures on the color.
But I might know the first thing about visual. But that's random, maybe not color, maybe black and white with contrast.
Well, she, what I'm saying now is the color is better.
Okay.
That instead of like the 1 by 1 each, icon, so instead of the 6 by 1, 3 by 3.
How are you partner with
Some days are better
the
than
teacher?
others.
Saying that we're not doing.
The thing is, she's
wow.
out of the loop. Like when we had that spec meeting with her, she was like, "Why am I here? Why is this meeting happening?" Like this isn't coming from college. This is mom's mom.
She did mention personally, September, she got with her.
Shelby's like,
No, I can hear you from all the years I worked in.
like, what do we want to have?
A train wreck every time I walked in.
And then,
And
oh, this is what actually happened.
what was your No, I know.
That's her. That's on her.
Right.
No.
Oh my God. The blonde, right? No, the guy. The guy.
Oh.
And he would, and I'm friends with him on
Scott.
Yeah, but then there's a waste of meeting because I'm what here to learn this.
Right, right.
But
He just went there so like he just would
not this one.
talk about his skating and sports all the time. And yeah. Emily is so she is productive.
Yeah, no, it
And
is.
she's so
They
organized
did check
and
them out for
really
Yeah, I mean, I know.
makes sense.
And she's like a lot of she's like yeah, she's like no, it's fine, or like oh like she did say that about she's like oh I didn't do so well on the test, so I don't want to do that next time. That's fair. I think that's for everything. I'm glad if you find that your way works. The only way to that is because mom is a doctor. In her goal it says long-term retention, do something to assess for long-term retention and a strategy. So I assessed it by doing the call and response. And then I gave her a strategy, visual association.
So I have.
And then if it
That's
so,
gonna be a
but
conversation.
then it's telling me that when we change
And I
the
know
program to
her
her
one
to do
I
what she wants to do
I remember right now.
it doesn't go well, and then
Sit up for a lot.
And
we should
like
replace
this. I'm surprised, like, she has someone that hasn't done that visual.
So but that's kind of like what
Really
we've
thoroughly.
been, that's the conclusion we're coming to, like whatever party's doing
Maybe it's
work,
been more
so
about
why are we doing that thing?
Right.
And then
Oh, she's absolutely
like I
wonderful.
want to respond to this because I have an answer to everything. Like I think the picture that you see from her from her. I think a lot of this would be like, okay, like I'm like, okay, listen, about the handwritten one, like that's fair. Like it would be more useful, and I will be happy to make a digital version of it just so we could reuse everything. Fair. Like, but like the other thing, there's nothing to say that a new strategy. That's just adding on, it's not replacing anything.
So we tend to have
But the vision.
I'm not saying
What
like
you-
it's
there's about,
so I'm just like,
it's about 10.
but I don't know, I emailed Maureen in case it's not responsive, so should we wait?
No, I do like it, but every year it seems like people are kind of shuffled around,
Just because at this point I
down a
don't
little
know.
bit. That's the only
I'd like to-
downside. You're in, are you in Torrington?
Torrington.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that like,
A lot of the same people have stated they've had trouble, we've had so much turnover, central office wise, administratively, and we're on like superintendent number 8 in the past 12 years. Some because we got rid of some because we had the right. But we have someone now who's been working with us, she was in principal at the elementary level, she's worked in the district for close to 15, 16 years.
okay.
So she's now taken over superintendent, so that's set us kind of in the right course. And we haven't had a real special ed director, I would say probably until last spring, maybe 6 years. So we have an interim now who has permission to stay for 2 years. I don't know how that works, but she does. And she was retired. And they just recently, in the past month, hired an
Oh, yeah.
assistant.
I think there was a way.
Yeah.
I remember that, oh, they said, that's why, yeah, they were.
Sherry is once Anne was out, then the person they just hired will continue on, so that they work together. But there's so much.
Or do the suggestion text
Oh, yes,
and
so much
just
happens.
put it in like quotations or
Well,
something, or highlight it.
You don't know how to open the emails, put it on the link, and finish my registration, like, that's kind of interesting.
And all that piece happens. I'm not saying it's not a good idea, but then
It's rather fun. Yeah, if you wanna start
we'll
a
still
company.
have
I'm just gonna, there's
programs.
some fun.
So they have a variety of more self-contained, non-verbal programs or spectrum programs or whatever, and then they get some calls from
And his sister is in town.
Right.
and it's a disaster, and then, so some of them leave and some stay, and it kind of morphs a little bit, and then we go to the high school.
And they are.
So there's just a lot of disconnect.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't know that it's
bring it
I know that my friend worked in the
Send
day,
it back, I was not gonna have to, cause I had,
but it's
HR
really
verify,
hard,
so
because
I
I
feel
like,
better
I get what the parents
written
feel,
then
so you need to have
with
this
their
is
seal
critical,
of the signature.
but then
Cause
how
I wrote a
can
job
we
description,
decide
they
what
signed
I
on it, and they filled out the
Right.
second
and you
folder.
just walk in and all the bus was gone because, you know,
We're missing
we're
a
gonna
component.
have to walk each
Right.
of all the buses, and say there's no other bus,
I'll
just missing one,
Well, HR handled it.
Oh, okay.
because the
Okay.
parents
All
are
right,
more
so let's
adamant
pick
about
back up,
younger age
guys,
buses.
now that you've had a couple of minutes to stretch and talk.
Granted.
So,
See more progress.
what we're gonna be focusing on for the rest of the session are executive function skills as it relates to transition. So if you take a look up at the screen there, you'll see what some of those skills are, and you know that from our discussion earlier, that we've talked a lot about these when it comes to self-determination. And so our executive skills are kind of, like to think about that as like the air traffic controller of our brain. It sort of takes over and helps us manage our emotions, how we set goals and follow through on plans, how we solve problems, how we respond to different situations, and it can be very effortful if you don't have those skills well established. And like Nicole was saying earlier, if you do have good self-determination or executive skills, you're more likely to be successful in whether it's a school setting or an employment setting. So those are skills that we definitely need to pay more attention to in terms of not only preparing kids for transition, but building those skills as kids are coming through our school systems. Because these are skills that even in the best of us don't fully develop until we're in our mid-20s, and some researchers are saying even later than that. So,
And it's later for males than females, right?
I believe so.
Significantly, yeah.
yep. So it's,
Yeah.
you know, I definitely identify as someone who has difficulty with managing my materials and managing, multiple tasks at once. That's definitely an issue for me. And so, but I was a successful student. I did really well in high school. I got into a good college, but I can't tell you how many times I either locked myself out of my dorm room or my apartment or my car, and that was, I was someone that you wouldn't on the surface say had an issue, but I definitely did. Knowing where those keys were and putting them in the same place every day is and always will be a huge issue for me. So when we think about our kids who have learning difficulties, not only do they have whatever their identified disability is, but they may also have at the same time real struggles with these kinds of skills. So we want to help them come up with systems that are going to help them to be successful, to be self-determined individuals. And we're going to look at a few different areas to talk about that.
So I have a solution though for you for the keys. Does anybody else know it?
A beep thingy?
Well, yeah, so
Okay.
that was mine. So I was always losing my keys. I've locked my keys in the car while the car is running.
Yeah, my
I've done
mom did
that.
once.
Now it's like impossible to do with digital, but at first I had a tile, right, so you could beep it. But now I don't even need a tile
Why?
because my car is keyless.
Oh, see, I can't get a new car right now. I
Right,
gotta
so,
stick with my
but
car.
eventually they're all key.
So
I don't have to
Oh,
know
yeah.
where it's just in the same purse. It's in my purse. I
Yeah,
never have to take it out.
yeah.
And
You
my
just have to
husband
make sure it's with you.
just got to make sure, right?
Yeah.
So you transfer your purse, but to get where you're going, so you just never take it out.
So now what's the solution for locking myself out of my house?
Yeah, spare key. I
Spare
guess.
key.
Yeah, my neighbors before my new neighbors had a key to my house, so if I locked myself out, I could go down there.
Yeah.
But now,
You can buy I have a number.
A number?
Keypad.
there you go, keyless entry, okay. All right, so we've got some solutions. But you see, it's all, we're talking about different technologies to help me be more successful, right? So we want to do this with our kids too. And one of the things you see is that what we talked about here is some low-tech and high-tech options. Because one of the things I find for myself is that I have to have backup systems. So I prefer, like you were saying with Google Calendar, being an iOS person predominantly, I use predominantly a Mac for my computer. I have an iPhone, and we use a lot of iPads. My predominant system for organization is the iOS iCal app, but I also have to have hard copy backup too. So we have to do this really interesting, complicated, at least time-consuming billing procedure. So every month I have to keep track of where I was, what contract number it is, what days I was there, what work did I do, how much time did I spend. So I always have a paper backup, not only for my billing, but important events that I'm going to be doing, my grocery list, even though my first choice is to do it all through here. So when I put together this slide, the low-tech version is if you click on that calendars that work link, that's going to take you to basically a bunch of different calendar versions that you can print out. And so that might be an option for a particular student. Maybe they're not going to be a high-tech solution, or maybe they need that low-tech solution as a backup. And then on the high-tech side, I have the LiveScribe pen that Nicole brought has a talking calendar feature. You are a Google Calendar user, that's free. So I use Outlook and Mac iOS. There's also My Study Life is a free website that you can use, and I included TimeTree, which is a free app because you can have multiple people and share your calendars back and forth. So you can have one calendar with multiple people's schedules, and that might be helpful in a in a family situation, so you know where everyone is. But you're going to be wanting to look at all those different features because you know what works for you. So like when we were talking about Google Calendar, you like the fact that it syncs across platforms, which is why I like iOS. And you can set reminders and link it to places that you're going to be, and you can do the same thing in iOS. That's one of the things that I like about having my phone and my computer linked up to one another is that I can put something on my calendar. I have a calendar that I share with someone who I have a horse and we take turns riding him, and so we have a shared calendar, so I know which one of us is riding on which day. We know when the farrier's coming out, et cetera, et cetera. I can set a reminder before I leave my house if there's something I have to do on the way. I can link that to an address. So all of those features are really important to consider for someone who might need that support. Go ahead.
Yeah, this morning we actually had a technology training related to calendar, and there's a new feature that they added. So you know how you could do notifications by, remind me at this time?
Mm-hmm.
They now have location-based notifications.
Right.
So you could say, as soon as I come home or when I get to this address, it'll actually pop up at the time. So that was actually really neat, and I could see it benefiting students, but like, once they get home, it reminds them about homework, because they might come home at a different time every day.
Right, or when they go to their locker, a reminder's going to come up, pick up all your books. Yeah, so that's one of the things that I've always liked about iCal reminders is that you can set those locations. So remind me when I get here, or remind me at this time. So you could do both location and time-based reminders.
Really cool.
But you're saying now it's in Google Calendar.
Now it's in Google
It used to be
Calendar.
in Keep, which we're going to talk about. So
Yeah.
that's interesting that now it's in Calendar, which is so who else is that good for? What students could benefit from that?
You mean the
Students
one
with
reminders according to location,
Yeah.
like when you arrive at your
Students with hectic schedules.
job too,
Well,
like
jobs.
kids who start
Jobs,
business.
Yep.
Don't forget checking your time card.
Right.
Or whatever,
Yeah.
Yep, you can have a quick so in the calendar you put the feature in, or you put the detail in it.
I think it's, we were looking specifically through Keep, but you can link them to calendar events.
Okay.
So I don't know if you can access it from the calendar, but we were looking at it as they're both integrated. Yeah.
Right, gotcha. Okay, yeah, because I've done it with Keep, where we've had a student, we were going to Stop and Shop, and so when she arrived at Stop and Shop, Keep came up and her list came up, her grocery list.
That's neat.
And we'll talk about Keep next. Did you want to do a little more with calendar? But remind me that.
I just wondered if anybody was familiar or had a system that they wanted to share about how they manage their schedule, their reminders, their appointments. Do you guys have a preference about one of those systems?
I like Google Calendar because when you're at your desktop, it just pops up, which I don't usually bring my phone around at work, so I just like that automatic reminder.
Yeah, I've been saved more than one time, you know, because we have to do an Outlook calendar for work too. I've been saved more than once by either a reminder in my iCal or in my Outlook where there was something that I forgot was coming up, and the reminder would be like, yeah, I gotta get there.
Yeah.
Good.
And then it can sync, so we really think about it can sync to personal devices now too on your person, so that it can sync right to your watch. And you can get an auditory, because you could enable voiceover on this. It could read to you. It can be haptic, or they call it taptic, the iOS, the Apple people, where it's making a vibration, so it doesn't actually make a sound, but it vibrates on, so you can actually go to it and look. I mean, so when you think about how powerful that can be for kids. And don't forget, we've got an Apple Watch in our lending library, so no one's ever taken it out. I know it has to be sunk to a phone. I know, it drives me nuts though, because you could still be trialing it. Now more people have it to see if they can access it, that type of thing. And you could sync it to any person's phone. We just wipe it when you bring it back. So please take it out if you ever need it for a kid.
So what I have on the screen here is I just clicked on the link for My Study Life, and you can see that these are the features that this has as well, and it can sync across devices. So I think those are important considerations, and I think of this, because it is a lot, I think of this primarily for kids who are going on to college, but that doesn't mean a kid transitioning to the workplace can't make use of a system like this. So the links in the PowerPoint are live, and I think maybe what makes sense is we just have an hour, right?
Yeah.
Maybe we should go through some of these other,
Yeah.
and then give you a chance to play around with that.
Now that LiveScribe link though, does that have a video about how to use the calendar feature? Because the talking calendar.
This is a blog. Let's see if there's a video. Oh yeah, here we go.
So
All
before we do it though, did you want to introduce the LiveScribe? I'm not sure if everybody knows.
Has everybody heard of a LiveScribe pen?
Okay.
Okay.
I'm not very familiar with
So
that.
here, while you're talking about it, I'll demonstrate while you're.
There's 2 videos. Is there a preferred?
Well, just give them a brief update about just a background about what the LiveScribe does, and I'm going to take notes so then they can see it.
Okay, so the LiveScribe pen has a little camera in it, and you write on it using very specialized paper. So as you're writing, the camera in the pen is actually recording what you're writing and is also recording what's being said. So there's a little toolbar at the bottom of the page that you can start the recording, jump to a particular place on the page. So as Nicole is writing, now if she touches where she was writing, it will play back what I was saying.
So she was talking, I hit record. So now these are my notes. So if she wants to go back later, or if I want, you don't even have to hit record, hit any place where I was writing. So whatever was happening at that point in time is being recorded.
Now, what would be the advantage of using that versus typing? You know what I mean? Like, yeah.
So there's first, depending on the student's preference, there's been a significant amount of research that says that you're more likely to remember what you handwrite and what you type. And so depending on the student's preference, and some kids are, not good with writing or typing, but maybe good sketchers. And so if they're making a visual representation about what I'm saying, they can do the same thing. They can click on the visual representation and listen to what was being said. There's also a way to connect that LiveScribe pen to your computer, so you can upload those recordings to your computer and play them back as they call it a pen cast. But you can see the drawing and the audio, so the drawing is being created and you can hear the audio at the same time. There's also an app I think that you can do as an add-on that will transcribe the notes into text.
If you want
So if I was like
go onto a computer or just an app? What software does it use?
It uses the LiveScribe software.
Oh.
It comes with it. I don't even know if it's paid. I think it just depends on which pen you buy, to be
I
honest.
use it on the Apple apps.
Yeah, no, I do even think there's a Chrome extension for it now. I think it works in Chrome.
I didn't know it.
Cause that's been the problem with like using it.
Ambient.
Yeah, so you can also, depending on which one, the speaker could be wearing a Bluetooth mic, right, that can go straight to it. Cause one of the problems, I don't know if I was kind of making a lot of noise and I was writing, so you can hear kind of some of the crinkles. But the speaker could be mic'd, so it records even better, yeah.
Do you have an idea, you said then it can be transferred to text?
Transcribed using OCR.
Does it, I'm thinking in terms of for some of the kids who have hearing loss and have everything, you go to a class that's 60 minutes long and then they give you a transcribed version of what happened and it's this thick.
Yep.
And then it's like this big book that they then feel they have to go back through. Do you have a clue if that does the same thing, or is it wouldn't be? Do you know anybody that's ever used it? I guess is a question for a long period of time, because it's cool for a minute, but would it be like overwhelming for a class, like a college class?
I don't think, in my experience, it's not, I don't know if I'm understanding you correctly, I don't think it's too overwhelming because, like, when you're playing, you can jump around in it a lot.
I'm thinking of students that I've had that have been at Northwestern.
Yeah.
And so when they've been up there, they have great, all kinds of great ability to say, we don't have to just have words through the air. Here's they're written out. They're they're available in so many different ways visually.
Right.
But they're very awkward. They're very large. You end up with a lot of material. So per class, a kid can walk around. Here's my day's papers, this much, because it's everything that's gone through.
Well, yeah, and I guess that would be a problem if they were going to carry hard copies around of everything they do, but this does transcribe it into your computer, so it makes it digital.
Okay, so that might be a way to
They would still have to weed through it, and with note taking in general, if you're using different resources, the research does recommend that you do some after work with your notes to help make the transfer, especially if you're recording or typing, you do some after work in terms of, going back to color coding or pulling information out that you don't think is necessary. So it probably would be an unwieldy amount of information, but I think it's important as a study strategy that the student go back and go through it and read it over.
People usually do, or they do with the partner who took the notes, because most of the kids aren't note taking, they're watching the signer.
Right.
So you can't sign and write and look and write, you can't do that. So then this was a way that was supposed to help circumvent some of that, but it still was very awkward.
Yeah.
But the fact that you could link it in would be helpful, because then you would be a lot faster for people to probably go back through and edit out or code out or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And also with this, if you have kids that have dysgraphia or a tough time writing, they can still use it. So they could, like Lisa was saying, sketch. They could say point 1, point 2, so they don't have to write everything, single thing. Also, if they get the PowerPoints in advance, they could photocopy the PowerPoints right on this sheet. So they could, if the PowerPoints are completed, then all they have to do is, while the teacher's talking, star bullet 1, and they're listening and recording, star bullet 2. So that way when they go back, they can press the star and bullet. Does that make sense? They have to write a little something, but it doesn't have to be full text. And I've seen teachers do skeleton notes that way. So it might be a main topic, right? Or however they've organized their skeleton note, and then it's printed out. So it's organized for the student, but then the student doesn't have to fill in all the text. All they're doing is circling, and I've seen kids doodling, and then they're listening, and they're also recording. And then that way, because I'm actually a doodler when I'm listening. That's how I process. That's it. So it's not a bad thing, but they don't have to necessarily write out everything the teacher's saying. So there's all different ways in which you could take notes and use it, and then it can be transcribed if you want, or it doesn't have to be digitally transcribed. Does that make sense? And the transcription is audio too. So if your handwriting's good enough, it converts to text. You can then make it searchable, etc. Look at it at the computer, but you can hear it on the computer too. It transfers the audio. And this was meant, I mean, it's such a cool tool, we've used it when we're talking about transition and life skills. I'll put that up there. I'll remember to put the resource up there. But can you think of other ways you could use this pen? Forget about note-taking.
Reminders.
Yeah, how so?
Reminders for yourself.
How so?
Go to this, when I go to Target, get blah, 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 or when I get home, or this assignment is due on, or.
Right, so you would have it in your notebook, you're saying maybe part of your notebook is reminders or whatever.
Right.
How else can you think?
Oh, also if like you're doing some kind of testing or interviewing a student or something, where you're listening to what they're saying, you record that and then you can write your own notes based on what they're saying. So it doesn't necessarily have to directly relate to what's being, you know what I mean? So it's like the audio and then the response to that, so that you could reference both of them.
Both of them? I hadn't thought of that, yeah.
Can I share?
Yeah.
One of the things, I'm doing another workshop on Thursday about AT for kids with dyslexia. And what we don't have here today, but there's different kinds of paper formats, and one of them is stickers. So you can record a sticker and then you can stick it onto something. So one of the ways, so, say for example, you had a job and there's different steps. You could say step 1 with a little picture, click on the sound sticker, get the direction. We just did another workshop where you could make each one of those sound stickers be a sound of a letter, like, and so the student listens to the sound and has 3 and has to combine those sounds into a word. So, how do I put those together? So there's a couple different ways you can do that. You could go pot, you could do top, but so there's a variety of things that you can do with the LiveScribe that's just not note-taking.
I recommended it for an individual who has Down syndrome, who's living relatively independently. He has a case, someone who comes in every day, but he has reminders to take his medicine. So he has to remember to take his medicine. He's using an Apple Watch to remember to take his medicine. He goes to his medicine, and he's got a sticker on there, and he touches it. You take 1 pill at 8. So the directions are read out loud to him. He doesn't have great literacy skills, but he's able to, with some adaptation. So he has his pen on him all the time, and he has little reminders all around it, even for things like medicine. So we're talking about independent living skills. It's a pretty simple, and it's so funny to me, this was a tool meant for college students, and you can use it in so many different ways.
Yeah. So we have a video here about how to use the pen for a calendar. So let's just take a look at that and pray the sound works.
Oh, you have to plug it in.
I did.
Okay, right.
On the 15th.
At 5 p.m., bring your uniform and take bus 47.
On the 15th,
Screen is unavailable.
at 5 p.m., bring your uniform and take bus 47.
It's like on the first one.
It's okay. You can see it. You get
You want to
this.
see that again? It's pretty quick.
You work on the 15th. At 5 p.m., bring your uniform and take bus 47.
On the 15th, at 5 p.m., bring your uniform and take bus 47.
So there's a special calendar template, and whoever was wrote 2 things, N and 7, and at the beginning it had started the message, and at the end it followed up.
And there's a journal, notebook, there's all different types. But again, you can photocopy too onto it. So if you had a template on the computer, you could print it out on their pages. And they used to have, I think they still do, printable pages. So
Download 'em.
you can download just a blank page. It looks like a blank page, but there's little dots or whatever, and you can put anything on top of it.
Oh.
Yeah.
All right.
we could probably do a 3-hour session just on, you know, ways to use the live scribe for independent living and all.
And it's available on Amazon, I just looked it up.
Yeah, we'll move forward. Actually, my favorite way to buy it, is usually before school starts. They're at Costco or BJ's.
Oh.
And the price is usually the same, but then you get a number of notebooks, cause you have to buy the notebooks or download the paper, and those get pricey. They're a little more expensive than a regular notebook. So I usually find them at Costco, BJ's, Target, but usually Costco and BJ's bundle all the notebooks together.
When you download, I'm guessing you have to pay for the pages?
No,
Oh, okay.
you know, yeah,
So you
the paper
yeah.
is free, but then you're using your ink and all that stuff, yeah. Alright, so we're gonna go, it sounds like everybody, and I'm, you know, just in the essence of time, understands, the features of iOS, right, reminders and Android reminders. I did just wanna go into Google Keep a little bit more because we talked about it. It's a great tool if you're not using it yet. I'm gonna show you and take a little risk here and get to my personal one, because my personal one I use a little bit more. Just raise your hand if you're using Keep. Alright, so over half of us. Okay, so some of us aren't, and that's okay. So, hopefully, alright, not too bad. Nothing totally inappropriate. Oh, my husband's on here too, so that's probably. So this is what my Keep looks like. So it might be a mess to some people, and it is a mess because I don't really keep it organized. But here's what I do. One of the things I love about Keep, first of all, it's across any platform. So there's an app, there's an Android app, an iPhone app, it's a Chrome extension, a web, and a website. I'm using the website right now. So I use this for a number of reasons. First things first, when I find something on the internet, an article that I don't want to read at that point or I want to save for later, one of the coolest things is, I'll show you it in action. So let's see, recipes my kids won't hate. Alright, so, salad recipes my kids won't hate. That's a funny one. So, up here, I've actually installed the Save to Keep extension. I'm not sure everybody always knows it. So if you're on Chrome and you're logged in, you can download the Save to Keep extension. So here's what happens. I click this. Now it's already saved in my Keep. But I might want to also add another note like Madeline, I don't know, might like this. I'm just throwing it. It's automatically saving right now. So I'm done. I can close this out. Now, when I go to Keep, there it is right there. Now, if I ever want to remember what recipe Madeline might like, I'm going to search Madeline, and what it does is, it does a Google search, which is the best search in the world, of your Keep. So that's why you don't really have to worry about necessarily always keeping it super organized, and I don't, because it will keyword search from what you've named it and also what it's getting from what you saved. So for curation of websites and that type of thing, and I know we have this under reminders, but it's super powerful in that way, and it's pretty much what I use because I can do it on my phone as well. So when you're on a website, I don't know if you guys have seen this when you're on your phone. Let me try to, where'd my cell phone go? Let me see if I can mirror up here. No, I'm on the employee, that's why. My personal. All right, well here, we'll use another skill that the Apple Watch.
I'm on the guest if you want to use mine.
If you guys don't have an Apple Watch, did you know you can do that?
Yeah.
Yeah, it paid for itself once I realized that.
What did you just do? You paged your phone.
You can page your phone.
Oh, that's awesome.
Do you know how many, because I don't have a landline, so, it paid for itself once I realized. Okay, so I'm mirroring my phone now. So, say I'm on a website. website, and I really like, I'm just, you know, obviously I have recipes on the brain. Sure, sheet pan dinners. So say I really like this website, and I'm searching the web, and I like this, and I want to remember it. I can hit the share button. So I hit the share down below, that, you know, the square with the arrow. And because I've allowed it to share with Keep, I can right now put it up to Google Keep. And again, I can make my notes. All right, another recipe. A cool thing here too on the phone, I don't know if you've noticed, if you have a work account or a number of accounts, you can select where you want to save it. So there's definitely times it's work related, but I'm on my personal phone. But since I've linked them together, I can put it to my work Keep. Or if it's a recipe, I'm putting it to my personal Keep. So you can save it to Keep right here from your phone, and now it's there across all platforms. So this is just another good life skill. You know, when your kids are doing research, how else do you think your kids could use something like this?
Well, it reminds me of Evernote.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep.
it's very, very, and I love it, but the only reason I prefer Evernote is because I can use my Rocket book
Yep.
and it'll go to Evernote, and I don't know if that will go to Keep.
It won't go to Keep, it'll go to your Google Drive.
Drive.
Oh, okay.
Where's the
Okay.
drive?
So, I mean, if it's like Evernote and you can scan and take pictures, like
Yep.
any kind of assignment, like their syllabus or whatever, like
Yep.
any paper stuff,
Mhm.
you don't have to keep anything paper anymore.
Yep.
Just put it on Keep or Evernote.
Yep.
It's your filing cabinet.
Yep. That's
basically.
100%. All of those letters notices that come home from my kids' school, I put them right up there and throw them just straight out. All the I make reminders, of course, in my phone and that type of thing. But when they're researching, a big project and they're curating all their, and I know we kind of get a little ahead of ourselves, but their websites, it's just a quick and easy way to say, okay, what's all the stuff I've done on Shakespeare, and here are all my websites and citations in there.
And the nice thing about this as opposed to Evernote, I mean, I know Evernote does have a free component, but in terms of the size and volume of information that you can share for free or save for free, using Keep and Drive together is much larger than you could do on Evernote for free.
So if you were to upload, I keep referring to it because Tammy's working on a Rocket book right now.
Mm-hmm.
So if you upload that to Google Drive and then you can just move it to Keep because it's an extension and it's
Well, those two things would be linked together. Your
Yeah.
Google Drive and Keep would be linked together.
okay. Oh yeah, because you've got the
I'm in it right now,
yeah.
So that's the website curation part of Keep. The other piece of Keep is, one, you can make lists. So, and I'll show you an example. My husband works by Costco, the poor thing. So this is his Keep list for when he goes to Costco. And I can add to it as we go along. So I'll just write Candy for Nick. So I can add to it. I can share collaborators. We can color code it. I can add photos. I can archive it if I want. You can do all sorts of other things with it. And then here's that reminder piece. So when should he get a reminder? He can get a reminder, pick a day and time, tomorrow at 5 p.m. before he leaves work. You can pick the location right here. So I don't want to remind him at Costco because he's already there, right? I want to remind him, and it's got I want to remind him at work. There it is. So while he's at work, at this time or whatever, when he arrives at it, it will, but actually that won't work because he's already at work. Right? Because the reminder that's a location reminder, so it's when he gets there, it will pop up. So what I could do for him, and like I've done with other kids, is we did a reminder for when they reach Stop and Shop in Southbury. When they reached Stop and Shop in Southbury, guess what popped up? This list. And so then guess what their job coaches did? Did they go around the store with them? Of course, these were kids that have been familiar with the store a little bit. The job coaches stayed in the front of the store, and they could watch in real time as the list gets checked off. So they kind of knew where the kid was, because if it's milk, they know they're in the dairy section, or candy, they're in the candy section. Then when the kid comes back around, you could say, hey, have you gotten everything on your list? I'm not sure if you went to the produce aisle or whatever. They can actually see in real time what the student's doing. I've also, then they can add to the list as well, if they want to. So I think Keep is a super powerful tool across platforms. Anybody can use it. Another way to use Keep, so that was the lists. There's the website curation.
So
And-
just sorry to interrupt, but that,
Yep, no.
the pop-up feature would only work if you had internet access, obviously.
Yes.
Okay,
Yep,
so I think that's an issue.
as,
for some,
and
I guess.
location
Yeah.
turned on.
Cause they just go through the Wi-Fi versus having
Yep.
data plans, so.
Yep, and you bring up a really good, point, is that at what point do we practice this authentically, and what does the student need to do that? I have had districts who have used little Wi-Fi boxes, what do they call it, it's not what I'm talking about, but.
I'm sorry, I got distracted by
Hotspots.
it. Gotta be-
Hotspots, thank you,
Yeah.
sorry, a Wi-Fi box, sorry, you can tell I'm not up to snuff here. Have used, those types of things for kids, in
Yeah.
order to practice them in the community, and that might be money well spent, they're not that expensive, but you're not obviously buying a kid a data plan or that type of thing, so.
Yeah, and I mean,
And with
yeah.
the iPhone, you can use your phone as a hotspot,
Yes.
so.
Yeah.
And it's not that as you need to be connected to service and your phone has to have permission. So if you're not on Wi-Fi and you wanna just use AT&T's network,
Yeah,
you can still get to everything.
okay. That's
Yeah,
what
you
I'm
just have to,
yeah.
you just
Yeah,
have to
Wi-Fi,
say it's
right.
okay for my phone to access that information and use the cellular service to do so.
Okay.
That made me think, do you need to get permission like from parents for privacy things or whatever if you're doing that now?
I'm
If you're
sure,
out in the community?
especially for location
You
services.
must
have
yes,
to.
I think
Absolutely,
there's some issues.
so there is the whole data privacy law, actually, we're gonna send out an AT tip on it shortly. And if you're not on our AT tip website, listserv, add your name to it, we send them out like every 2 weeks or so, and they're usually pretty functional tips, so, I'll put a little list up there. But, there's a whole data privacy law that's in effect, it came out over a year ago. Things need to be vetted, I have no idea if Google Keep is vetted. There's a whole Learn platform that you can go look and see if the state has vetted it.
But
That's
wouldn't
a
it just be
Yeah,
part of
that's
the
a good
Google
one.
Suite?
I'm not sure about Keep, to be honest. But regardless, if it's not vetted, there is an exception in the law now. It came into effect in July of 2018 that says kids with IEPs, if they needed to access their IEP and there's nothing else we could use instead of it, we're gonna sign off and give consent for that to happen. So if it's not vetted currently, you can use it under the exception of kids having an IEP, but there's a whole process for it. So,
Because Grammarly will not comply.
no, they won't.
So that's a big extension that can really come in handy. Has anybody got them?
Nope.
Well, I have a
So is
student
anybody
that-
using it?
My student downloaded it independently.
Yep.
He's
On their
18.
own personal account?
Yeah.
I have a
Yeah.
student that does that too, but they won't do it in the school account, which
Nope.
kinda defeats the whole purpose of them writing papers in school.
Yeah, I've had kids copy and paste back.
I
Yeah,
didn't
that's
know
what I
that.
have one student.
Wait, sorry,
do.
so what happened? They didn't sign up the permission?
They
or-
won't sign the, Privacy Act.
The
Yeah.
privacy laws for the state of Connecticut.
Weird.
No, it's not weird. Well, so Connecticut's is pretty strict.
Yeah.
And it's good, it's a good thing, but they kind of threw the baby out with the bathwater with certain things. So, we are the only state that has certain language in it out of all the states. Not every state has a data privacy law yet. So Connecticut's a small state, so some of these companies are just not complying because they don't care.
It's just Connecticut.
Right, with certain language that they don't want to agree to. Now, that having been said though, Diane, is if that is a extension this kid needs to access their IEP, and there's nothing else out there like it, Ginger's the other one, and I don't think Ginger's complied
They won't
either.
either.
Under the law, you can count that as an AT exception. We're gonna send out this tip shortly. The
Okay, I'll
state
look
just
for it.
sent it out to all your IT people and your special ed directors, but I don't know that they're paying attention to it. So we'll send it out to you guys. But you need a process. You have to have the parent sign consent. If he's 18, he might be able to sign consent. Not 18, so. So there are exceptions, so don't get discouraged, but you have to go through the hoops. One last thing for keep is reminders, so you can take, like I said, you can make your own reminders. Ooh, I'm searching. Up here, you can make your own list. I'm doing it over here. I guess maybe because I'm in the search. Let me go here. So here's where you go. You can do lists. Kids can draw too. So I have some students who don't like to type that will draw with it. Which I'm ridiculous at that, so that's all I'm gonna do. And you can also take photos. So how could that help your students?
They can take a photo of the board.
Yep. Take a photo of a board, name it. How
Their
else?
notes, if they already wrote like a few pages of notes, they can just do that.
Yep. Just title it
Yeah.
Wednesday Language Arts. How else could it help kids?
Field trips.
Yeah, how so?
If they go to a museum or something, they have to do a project and nature journals, they can do that, keep it in their notes, and they can easily add it to paper as a reference.
Just keeps it all collated, easy to search instead of searching their thousands of pictures, right, of which all kids have, right?
Yeah.
So they can at least put it in keep, then they can find it more easily.
Do they go in one at a time, or do they go, can you like make a group of pictures as,
You know, that's a good question, Dan.
like say if he was on the field trip and they took,
Yeah.
And do you have to share it with specific people in order for them to access it?
Yeah, so,
Okay.
let me see, I just selected 3. Yeah, you can do multiples, I don't know if there's a certain limit, but I just selected 3 right now.
We also saw this morning that if you take a picture of anything with text, there's a function where you can do grab text and it'll convert it.
OCR,
Yeah.
which is super cool.
It's really cool.
And
Even
that's
with
the super,
handwriting.
note.
Google
It's
Keep does that?
Mm-hmm,
That's
Yeah.
And Google Drive.
yeah,
Yeah.
We did
that-
Google
yeah.
OCR
Yeah.
the drive, yep.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah,
That was
Google
good.
has really
Yeah,
good
they put that
text
together.
recognition
Yeah.
software.
Yeah.
And with their Translate too, for students who, are English learners,
Yeah.
there's like real-time translations, where if they are like reading a poster in English, and if they want to see it, in Farsi or whatever, they'll hold it up and on their screen it'll actually turn into that language, and
Yeah.
it'll keep the same font and color and everything. It's insane.
It is, but that is not, cause I use that a lot, in Italian, and so I try and do that. I did that with my dad last night. He brought home a book, and I was like, I think it says blah, 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 and so I used the Google Translate, and it was alright. So I think it's great to have it, cause it gives you an idea. It's better for single words
Yeah.
than it is for grammatical
Yeah, no,
phrases.
the translation is not as good as the text recognition. 'Cause
Yes.
it recognizes the words correctly, but it doesn't always translate them to another language.
Right.
It's amazing now.
It is, it's
Yeah.
incredible.
So here are the photos, I just did a pic, and so right here, then you would add collaborators, and you can edit and name it from here. So I can title this gingerbread. Here's my friend's kid, look at her.
Aw.
She's so cute, oh my gosh. Anyway, so yeah, you can upload multiple, and it was quick too. I mean, we're on good Wi-Fi, but you know how sometimes it takes forever to transfer photos and stuff.
Yeah.
It was pretty quick. Parking spaces, reminders, that type of thing. I take pictures and put it in Keep and share it with my husband. Here's where our car is parked. Oh my God,
Yeah.
we were lost in Mohegan Sun once.
Yes.
It was not pretty.
Yes.
You were lost in Mohegan Sun too.
Yeah,
We were
it's
like,
okay.
this is purposeful. They don't
They
want us
do.
to.
They don't want you. That is true. Even how they lay out the inside, they don't want you to get out.
I mean,
They get you in there.
we had to have a person
Yep.
come like with the little security and bring us to our
Yeah.
car, like drive us. It was
Yeah.
it was ridiculous. So anyway, so that's Google Keep. And
Wait,
I
so
know
I'm kinda stuck on, so if you have a worksheet, you can take a picture of it, put it in Google Keep, and it's OCR? No.
Well, you have to set up your permissions. Well, I don't know about Google Keep, but in Google Drive, you have to set up your settings, and we were gonna go over that. We're gonna go over
Okay.
that in a minute. So I don't. Do you want to skip to that?
yeah, let's go. While we do that, we're, just in the interest of time, a bunch of reminder devices that are up here. You can look at them at your leisure. One of them, of course, is the Apple Watch, which is the most expensive, right? But there's still the Revive. Does anybody remember the Revive? That's like a mid-tech device where you could set and it vibrates on your arm. There's a few other watch minders. These are all like vibration things. A Fitbit now we've used that with kids. usurping a data plan, that type of thing. You do have to connect it to a phone to set it, but that's a great reminder system. And there are a bunch of little smartwatches for kids that I've used with kids with some cognitive disabilities that don't look too baby, that work so they can be texting their parents or a limited amount of people, be using a limited amount of phone calls, 911, that type of thing, and set reminders. So there are a bunch of smartwatches out there now, and some of them are for younger kids, but some of them are totally age appropriate for some older kids, but a little bit more simple if you need that for kids in the work environment or in college. So definitely check those out because a lot of people don't know about them, and there's some really neat things. And these are also a bunch of reminder apps. There's a lot out there. Those bottom two is just a list of reminder apps, but I would say those 4 or 5 are the most commonly used reminder apps. But to be honest, I use whatever the kid already has in their phone as much as possible. That's what's least restrictive. Mm-hmm. If it's then not meeting their needs, the phone or whatever iOS or operating system you're using in school, then I would look to these other apps. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. They do some other things, but in general, usually I use what's least restrictive, and it's usually okay for kids.
We actually had all of our high school students download the Remind Me app, and we use it for announcements and sports teams and things like that too.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk a little bit about the Rocketbook next. I see that you're using a Rocketbook. I'm a relatively new user, and Nicole and Carol Ann were the folks that turned me onto it. How many people have used a Rocketbook before and know how it works? Okay, so a Rocketbook is a special notebook, and Nicole and I both have them. So the way they're set up is it has this special paper that's sort of plastic. It has a plastics built into it, and it can be written on and wiped off with water and erased. And so what you'll notice, all of the pages have this black border around the edge, a QR code, and then at the very bottom there are little icons about where you can send your notes to. So my notes in the front, and you establish this using an iPhone app, which is free, and then you just dedicate when you circle one of those apps, where everything is going to go to. So I have one that goes to my iCloud mail account. I have one that goes to a student evaluation file. I have one that just goes to my Google Drive in general. I have a work email. I have one that goes to a specific file in Google Drive called demo file, and I have one that's a journal, and then I have one that I can text to Nicole and Carol Ann. So you write whatever you want to write on those pages, and then you use the special pens. So I've got these friction pens. You need a special pen. They also have markers. So you just, once you've finished writing your notes, you just circle in the destination, open up your iPhone app, scan it, and it goes up to wherever the destination is that you wanted to send it to. So I think this is a really great tool for teachers and for kids, and in fact so many teachers are taking this on that the Rocketbook people have a educator's blog. So I would look for that educator's blog, and if I didn't put it in here, I will put it in a link to that. And they also have put together all of these free papers that you can download and use for Rocketbook. So they have papers for graphing, they have papers for note-taking, they have papers for music. So there's all different kinds of tools that you can use, and the link right here in the PowerPoint will take you to that site that has the free Rocketbook paper. And so now there is handwriting recognition, and I'm going to show you a little video so you can see how that works.
A few months ago, I put up a post about how Google Drive now has some OCR built into it. And I'm still surprising people as I show it. So I want to re-show it, but I also want to show you a change that they made to OCR that is pretty darn cool. So let's start with it's funny when I say just plain old, because I think it goes above and beyond that. This is pretty awesome. So what I'm going to use as my example is I'm going to use a page from a Rocketbook. So this is something that I simply took a picture with. I probably used my camera and to Google Drive. Here's how you can get OCR to work just flat out on its own in Google Drive. I'm going to come up here to the settings. I'm going to click on settings. When I click on settings, there is a choice that says convert uploads. And I'm going to click here on convert upload files to Google Docs editor format.
So it's not just for Rocketbook. This is where you're putting your OCR settings in Drive.
And you were talking about how it could do handwriting in general. This is, you can just do this as a matter of course in Google Drive now, and we're going to talk about now how you can do it with the Rocketbook.
Right, but it's all uploads.
Okay.
So that when you put that feature in.
Does OCR just mean converting something from handwritten? Sorry, I've never heard
Yeah.
those.
So
term
yeah,
before.
so thank you for clarifying. Yeah, it's called optical character recognition. So what that means is, if I were to take a picture of handwritten notes and upload it, it's just a picture of my notes. So a text reader couldn't read it as text because it's just a photo.
Right.
So OCR is essentially software that converts either handwritten or otherwise any other picture that's non-digital text, converts that into digital text so that you can have it be read.
Okay.
Or handwriting converted to text, which then you can do it.
So you're saying no more snap burger crap?
Right, because the whole thing is, we used to pay tons of money for scanners, like actual big scanners, and scan our books in, portable scanners still, now some of our big Xerox machines can scan, but OCR is still a thing. You can use certain pieces of software, but it's still pretty expensive and it's not always reliable, so.
Okay.
And you're going to see I've already checked it. And I'm going to click done. If you haven't seen this, you're already going to, I hope, enjoy this video. And then keep in mind, I'm going to be adding some stuff on top of this. So I'm going to right click on this image. And when I right click, because I went into my settings and said convert uploaded docs to Google Docs format, I'm going to go to open with, and then you're going to see Google Docs. So with that checked, Google Drive is going to do a little bit extra to this doc. It's going to look at it, it's going to realize that that was an image, and then it is going to perform OCR on the image. So check it out. Here it is. There is the text that is from this photo. And I just think this is fantastic. So this has been a very dandy way. There's a lot of different apps that can kind of somewhat do this. But with the fact that you're probably working with students and students are working in Drive, and you're probably working in Drive with other educators, how awesome is that? So I'm sure you're saying, what? Here's how I did it again. I'm going to head here into settings. And then when I go into settings, I'm going to check convert uploaded files to Google Docs editor format. And now when I right click on anything, it'll say open with Google Docs. And then I can go ahead and it will perform OCR on that. Any image that has text, it'll perform OCR. Is it perfect? No. I mean, it's very rare that you're going to find perfect OCR, but it's better than nothing. So that's been out for a while. It's been out for about 6 months. So here's the new change that really surprised me. So I have here my Rocketbook just to show off this demo. If you don't know what a Rocketbook is, if you know me, you probably know what a Rocketbook is because I offer them on my website and I do book signings with them. It's a reusable smart notebook that you use a pilot friction pen and you can simply erase the notes with water. And it also is a smart notebook that allows me to save to the cloud. So this is an easy way for me to show this to you and get this note to the cloud. If you are aware of Rocketbook, I did send out a tweet a couple days ago about these new friction pens. They're called the Pilot Friction Sticks. They are not a replaceable ink, but they are affordable and they write really well. So here is the next part of the demo. I'm going to handwrite into this and I'm going to say, hello everyone. How are you? And I'm going to assume some of you know where this is going. So I just wrote in there. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my handy dandy iPhone and I'm going to open up the Rocketbook app. And what the Rocketbook app allows me to do is it allows me to save to a variety of destinations. So I'm going to mark this note. So come down here, there's a little icon. I'm going to mark this note. I am going to now head back to my Rocketbook app. I'm going to say new scan. And you won't probably see this as the magic as much. You probably saw the green page and it just dropped into my Rocketbook app. And we will say done. And it's transcribing it and it's going to send it to my Rocketbook upload folder. So let me get to my Rocketbook upload folder. That was my Rocketbook guest book. And it takes a moment or two, which I like to call a soda break.
She was happy with
And there it is.
Yes.
So now that I have it, let's just go ahead and there's that note. There's that note straight to my Rocketbook. If you're not familiar with Rocketbooks, this is what makes them so cool. I can send them to multiple destinations. And this is what makes them so cool. But, so I can come in here and I can say open in Google Docs because it takes the picture as an image. And when I do, there it is, guys. Handwriting recognition. Handwriting recognition as OCR in Google Drive. This is fantastic. This never used to work before, and now it does. I'm not sure when the change was made, but it's fantastic. Handwriting recognition, and what was so fun is when we were tinkering with this, it was during a break, and then everyone was kind of watching on the big screen, and when they saw this show up, the look on all of our faces was just pure shock and happiness. So there you have it, guys. It just showed you how to do OCR setup for Google Drive. And doing that, it will go in and it will change any image that has text and we'll try to recognize it. But now, handwriting recognition. Handwriting recognition as well. Write something, get it into Google Drive, and as long as you have that setting to convert uploaded files to Google Docs, it will do handwriting recognition. So I hope you enjoyed that. I'm Leslie Fisher with lesliefisher.com, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thanks for spending 6.5 minutes of it.
So, a couple of things to keep in mind with. Because you can wipe off those pages and reuse them, if you're going to do the handwriting recognition, make sure that that page is completely dry, so make sure it's not a page that you just wiped off, or use a page that's brand new and hasn't been used, because if it's at all moist, it won't recognize your handwriting, because I did try that. So that's one of the things that you can do with your handwriting and the Rocketbook. The other thing that you can do with handwriting and the Rocketbook is you can now title your Rocketbook scans, because previously, I don't know if you noticed, but they would all say RPG, and then they would have a number with the date. Now if you do this hashtag, 2 hashtags at the beginning of the end, in the end of whatever you're titling your scan, it will send it up to your drive with that title on it, which is really helpful for keeping track of what all those different scans are. So what I tried was, I was trying the transcription feature that's in the app and sending it to my email rather than using the OCR in Google Drive. So this is what I wrote out in my notebook just as a test. And then you can see here's the screen grab of my email, and down at the bottom of the page there is how it, is how it transcribed. Let's see if I can zoom in a little bit here. But if you, can I zoom in on this?
Yeah.
So,
Should be able to. No?
yeah, that's what I tried to do.
Oh, sorry.
So at the bottom there, what you can see is you can see the title, Rocketbook Feature Test. It came out in text rather than my handwriting, and it got everything correct. The only mistake it made was where it said this, it inserted a comma and the I. Other than that, it was completely correct in the transcription. So I thought that was a really cool feature and could be very helpful. The other thing that I think could be really helpful for kids in terms of transition, in addition to the different types of paper and the handwriting recognition, was something that I was hoping to try today, but just turned out to be a really hectic morning. What you can do is you can take any piece of paper, and if you put a black border around it, So if I put a black border around this piece of paper, just like is in the notebook, and blew up the icons for where to send it, you could do the same thing with this. You could take a picture of this big chart paper after you've colored in the icon and where you want to send it, and send it off to whatever destination you want to use. So if you're in a classroom and you have a student who's not a good note taker, but they have a Rocket Book, they can take a picture of whatever's on the screen here and send it off to their Google Drive, and even if they want, then they can use the OCR and go Google Drive, turn that into text, and they have all that information. So I thought that there was lots of applications for this, given that now I know I can make a Rocket Book page out of any piece of paper, as long as I can go around the edges and put the borders in black and put the little icons at the bottom.
Similar to this, but it's there's an app called Adobe Scan that it automatically detects the borders of a document, converts it to a PDF, and converts any text it reads to readable text. So there, I don't know how good its OCR is, but there's an element of that. You can also send it to Drive and share it, and it's automatically uploaded on a cloud, so it doesn't even take up phone storage.
Great,
It's
excellent.
paid, right, the Adobe Scanner?
No, it's free.
That's a free one? Alright, we'll put it in here. Just put a link to it. Any others that you know of off the top of your head?
I've used that Adobe one before too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I've used Prismo, I've used some of the more, you know.
Right.
So why do you need a friction pen if you could just use any paper and any marker and make it black?
In the notebook, you have to have a special pen because the paper is partly plastic.
And that's just to make it reusable.
Right.
It has nothing to do with your phone reading
No.
the ink kind of thing.
No.
Okay.
No,
Yeah.
I always
those
thought that
pens are
was-
just
okay.
to allow you to get multiple uses out of each page.
Okay.
It has nothing to do with the scanning.
Okay, and what about like the Wave versus the Everlast? Do you have I only have experience with the Wave.
I've
You have the
only used the
Everlast.
Everlast. Have you ever
The
used
way is
any?
the microwavable one?
Yeah, and that's the
Yeah.
one
Yeah.
Tammy has, so it's
The only thing I've heard is that it gets
Microwave.
that it ghosts a little bit more. Have you noticed that when you microwaved it, that
I haven't
it
had to
ghosts
do
in the
that yet.
background?
It is a little bit,
Yeah.
you can definitely see, and you also can't leave it in a hot car,
Yeah.
cause it will erase.
It'll wave.
That is so interesting.
Yes.
Yeah, I
It
found
will-
out
it will
because
erase your notes if you're,
Yeah.
if it's over the
I
summer.
tried to use those friction pens on this notebook,
Yeah.
and in heat or cold, the ink will disappear.
But yeah.
Oh, so, well, cause it's just erasable ink.
Right.
So I kinda liked it, like,
Yeah.
I'm not to do a legal document
Like, oh,
with
let's
this.
make it.
Yeah.
That's something I was mindful of, I'm like, oh, I shouldn't
That's-
sign,
Yeah.
permission to share forms or whatever with it.
And also with the Everlast, I don't know if you've noticed, you're not supposed to leave, see, and I've screwed this up, oh no, it's Lisa. You're not supposed to leave your text on for like more than a month, they say,
Oh.
without erasing it, because
Right.
it'll ghost too. It'll stay on there. So
Yeah, that's not usually a problem for me. I have a tendency to erase it like right away.
Yeah.
But
Can I just say, like, with my 16-year-old son, who is typical but scattered, so whatever, but he uses his Rocket Book for all of his classes, and it just has eliminated like all of the notebooks that he's needed.
Yes.
And less binders, and then even like taking pictures of his syllabus and everything and uploading it, and just eliminating paper has helped him a lot.
it's been a huge, anything that can be digitized for me has been a huge help because I am one of the exploding backpack kids. So even if you look at my pocketbook now, there's
Yeah.
just tons of paper in there that I have no idea why it's there, and it's all crinkled up. So being able to use a Rocket Book or any digitized format has been a huge help for me. So I wanted to show you one more thing, and this is a strategy that I think could be done, well, it can be done either low tech or high tech, and is specifically designed for kids who have executive function issues, and it's called Get Ready, Do Done, and it was developed by 2 SLPs, I believe, and you can get emails from them, but if you search Get Ready, Do Done, you'll find a ton of stuff. But basically how Get Ready, Do Done works is that this is a way to get kids to be able to perform any task and organize themselves, and it's a strategy that they can take ownership of. So even though you work from left to right, you develop the task sheet from right to left. So I start with the done column first. And so what I was thinking of is for a student who had to stock shelves. So in order for him to have done that shelf stocking task correctly, he or she would know, because all the items he had to put out were on the shelf, all the items were facing front, all the same product items are together, and the shelf matches the stocking map that kids get when they have to stock shelves. And so you can add pictures to this. You know, you could do this in a variety of formats. So if you wanted to, say, do this on with a LiveScribe pen, you could add an auditory feedback to this. So once I get my done, then I go back and say, okay, now what are all the steps that I need to do to be able to stock the shelf? So I kind of task analyze that out and put that there. And then before I even start to do the task, how do I get ready? You know, I need a cart to take out to the store to the right shelf. I need a map of the shelf and the shelf stocking map, and I need the peanut butter that I'm going to put on the shelves. So now that I've done this, I can go out and I can just check off things as I've done them. I can add pictures to it. But this is a really great strategy for anybody who needs a task broken down and a strategy to approach it. And I think this could be very easily done either low-tech or high-tech. Like I said, if you search for get ready, do done, you're going to find videos, you're going to find PowerPoints, you're going to find lots of information. But the one really important thing to remember is you construct it from right to left, and then you carry it out from left to right. And those colors are important too. Get ready, do done.
Yeah, because the done is red. And so you could also adapt it, you know, thinking of that using the LiveScribe using the LiveScribe pen. So if that's up at a workstation, right, and you're using some pictures, but your kiddo might still have a hard time understanding all the steps, right? Besides video modeling and all that kind of stuff, they could just touch it.
Yep.
And
I have a template in my Google Drive that I made using my Rocketbook. So I think there's lots of different ways to take this strategy and make it useful.
Stop me if you guys are going to talk about this, but that reminds me a lot of something else that's helpful. It's called Trello.
yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead, but tell them about it. We can look at it while you're doing that.
Yeah, so it's pretty much, I do this with house chores. So there's 3 columns: to do, doing, and done. And then you can add cards, and you can add collaborators. So then if you're doing something, then you can say, okay, I'm going to drag this card and put it on the doing. So then you can see who's doing what. And then once it's finished, you can put it on the right one. So it's just a way to like manage tasks. And you can do it individually, or you can do it with groups. So it could be, you know, you just have a list of all things you need to do, but it's I guess at a glance, like almost like real-time checklist.
Yeah, that's great. The only difference would be is that done column is supposed to be an exemplar of how do I know I've done it right.
Right.
So that would be the only difference, but that Trello is a great resource.
Yeah.
Are you on the CREC Wi-Fi with that phone?
No.
Sorry. I was going to say you could mirror it and show it, because we do have it on our apps, but if you had, sorry, losing my voice here. If you had some examples, no, I have a cough drop in my mouth.
Okay. I was gonna say with the get ready, do, done. Our BCBA does so many task activities for. I mean, I'm even thinking like at the preschool level, like she's doing like toilet training, and she does the exact like the backward training, the backward training. So she and you always start with that last thing that needs to be done, like washing your hands, and then you make them do that, and then you back it up to flushing the toilet.
Right.
So that's really applicable to what she's doing.
Yeah, it's a great strategy, and like I said, there's tons of resources for it online. And there's some good videos describing how to put together your boards, your get ready, do done boards. So,
So unfortunately, we only have 10 minutes left, and we haven't even gotten to show you guys to let you play around with some of our apps. But what I did want to show you, I think I'm trying to triage which ones would be best to. What we haven't looked at, I'm sorry, I'm going backwards. I don't know how familiar so we skipped over visual schedules in general. I don't know if you've ever been to PBIX World, but definitely check it out. I don't know if there are tons of visual supports, low tech in PBIX World. and also Practical AAC for visuals. These are 3 visual scheduler apps that we use with kids. I don't know how, is anybody familiar with any of these? This is ChoiceWork, then first, then Visual Scheduler, then Visual Scheduler Planner. So you've seen some of them. Has anybody else seen some of these?
The first then one, yeah.
Because what we could do is, if you want, why don't I go through and show you the slides of the apps that we haven't gotten to look at, and for the last few minutes, would you like to play with some of them? Would that, like, for the last 5 minutes, would that be an okay, would you like to do that?
We also have to do the evaluation form.
Yeah, actually, I was gonna do it, even online.
Oh.
We could send it to them digitally if we want to, but they can fill it out here, it might be easier. So, the visual schedulers, these are all on our apps. Assignment calculators are great for kids who are planning long-term assignments. There's 2 of them there. I don't know if you've used them. One from UConn, one from Minnesota. They're great for kiddos with that blank page syndrome. They don't know what to start, you know, and so it helps them. You can actually differentiate by what type of writing it is. Yeah, so you can click, and so I think the UConn one, it says, okay, this assignment is maybe it's not UConn's that does the type of writing. It might be Minnesota.
Or RIT, I think, has one too. Lots of schools have one. The school library has one in there.
Right.
I'll format it a little different.
Right, so if this is a research paper, you go to say it's due the 28th. It tells you all the things you have to do. There is a sign in, but you don't have to sign in. You can calculate it, and it will tell you based on every day what types of things you're supposed to be doing for that type of assignment. So I wish I had this in college. It would have saved me many a late night.
It will link you to planning templates. It'll give you hints for how you should go about that step.
Mm-hmm. Note taking, one of the apps we didn't talk about was Notability. That's a fantastic app if you want to explore it. We have it here. And let me see what else we really didn't get to. Researching and archiving again, we talked about Google Keep and Evernote. So these are a bunch of to-do lists. So Trello is one you just mentioned, but there's a number of them out there besides Google Keep. Todoist people really like, and Wunderlist. So these are on our iPads too. And there's a number of apps we have on there for budgeting as well. So I'm sorry we didn't get to do the hands-on too much, but what we can do right now is in the next 5 minutes, we'll give you the evals. But if you did want to look at any of them, they're all loaded on these iPads. But also, don't forget, they're on the CREC. Don't worry, I sanitized them all. They are on the CREC Lending Library iPads. So if there's any, you don't have to look at them now if you don't want, but if you want to look at some of them, they're here now. But don't forget, you can borrow any of our iPads. Oh, just pull that back a little bit. The keyboard actually pull towards you. There you go. Oh. And now, any of our iPads, even just to trial and play for yourself. 2112. So if you want to look at any of them now, does everybody know how to search an iPad? You take your finger in the middle and swipe down, and then you can search for the app. If there's one or two you want to look at. Otherwise, we'll give you the eval.
Do you want to use my iPad?
Sure. I'll just what is that one?
Yeah.
I think all the apps are downloaded on this one.
Is asking, can she send the iPad home with her students so that the parents can play with touch chat too?
They want to, yeah. What do your district, do you have a policy?
We do for our, no, I mean, it's yours. It's one,
Yeah, but do you have them sign?
Yes, one is for signing
ours.
ours.
You can do
And
labels.
then
But
also,
is it
do you
all
have
always
any
on
other
like one?
cases?
Yeah, it's always
Yeah.
one big thing. I think when you move it
I have a tabletop.
but it's not,
that
as far as I know, you can't folder
me.
things and
We
keep.
don't have a tabletop one, but
I do
forward
like
it
it
to
though,
me,
it's
we can
cool.
buy
I
them.
feel like it's easier,
Okay.
might be easier for
Cause
kids
you're
to
coming
hold
out
things
Friday,
and
so
stuff.
she's like, if you have something to bring with you.
Yeah,
you don't
I
have
don't
to
today, but I
I
think you
think
buy
the
it
nice
off
thing for me
Amazon
is
and have it
I
for
do
Friday.
very few folders in Drive, and I
Do you want me
just,
to put?
because it's so searchable and because there's so many different
Yeah.
ways you can search it,
Yeah.
I find that I don't have to folder things. It's
And
not that
then
you shouldn't, but I
just
found that you can be successful without
Yes,
a folder.
definitely, it's funny, as my coworker, I'm more of a, like, I could just find it by searching,
Yeah.
but she's very organized, so she would like comment on my drive if it wasn't.
Yeah,
Organized,
she
like,
probably has
okay.
folders,
Yeah.
yes, yeah.
Yeah.
If I could get away with not doing that, I would do
verbal.
that.
That's
She's
funny.
verbal.
Okay.
It's beyond
Would you say
verbal,
verbal?
yeah, she's.
Beyond verbal, okay, she doesn't tell you
Yeah.
a minute. She's
I
really,
wonder if it's
yeah,
like a
just very,
therapy.
not very pleasant often.
Right, right.
But, our case
What was
manager
your
is
house
very
number?
French, and she
But
comes
let's
usually.
Right.
Oh,
So I'm not
52363.
sure how much you would be able to look at that without a.
Right, I mean, without I'm not a vision, but I mean, I can show you
Yeah.
what the devices do to help her vision, and we can see based on her behavior, but she probably would need, about.
Right, that's what I'm saying, and her PPT's on Tuesday, and we're probably gonna request an AT eval.
Right, okay.
But also request
So
as
maybe
a
vision
maybe,
first,
or,
yeah, for sure.
okay,
And
do best,
there's
do
vision
best.
dynamics.
Okay, so we'll talk about that more, I
Yeah.
just didn't want you to be surprised.
Okay, yeah,
And
that's
be
good
able
to
to
know.
bring whatever you
Right.
needed.
How do you access this?
Yeah, these aren't the evals, Lisa. We will send you guys a link to
The
the
bit
evals.
You mean that whole slideshow?
Yes.
That's that Google, I
That's the,
shared it with you.
okay.
Yeah, and make
Gotcha.
sure to add it to your own drive so you have it.
And if you lose track of it, I added it, I can share it with you.
And don't forget, you can sign up for our AT tip if you want to get some updates. And you're welcome to play for a few minutes. I'm sorry we didn't make it as hands-on as we had hoped. But again, don't forget, please borrow the stuff. We actually have a lot of iPads and minis out right now, but you can borrow them for your own use too and to trial with kids. So thank you all for coming by, live stream
Thank
people.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for your participation.
Enjoy the rest of your
Thank
week
you.
and have a
This is
good
Jen.
holiday vacation.
I know, oh my gosh.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
How can I save it to my drive?
To add to drive, I think it's in file, Diane.
Or there's an icon all the way to the right of the name of the document. Usually, there's like a little Google.
I don't think I have that screen.
Yeah, I don't know why it isn't working like that, is it?
I think it's, no,
Right.
Did you open it and get it back? Type the bit.
Wait, is this one yours? It has the lending
No.
library.
Yeah.
mine's
Get it from over there.
Yes. No, this one's yours?
Mine had instead of, I
This
feel
is,
like
I think this one, I feel lending library too. Hi, can I ask you, is this a lending library? So I actually have someone who needs an iPad. Thank you. But